So, morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. So thanks for coming along today to our exam Cram session for the PL-900 Power Platform Fundamentals exam. So, just for awareness, this session is being recorded. It will be made available on YouTube afterwards. And obviously, the usual sort of, by attending today, you consent to your video being recorded and all that good stuff. So, assuming you're all fine with that, if not, feel free to turn off your camera now. Okay, next slide, please, Carl. Okay, so we've got quite a sort of a big agenda for this morning with a lot of content to get through. So we're not going to really sort of beat around the bush too much. So we're going to look at, first of all, giving you a bit of an introduction to the Power Platform, getting you equipped so that you can actually set up a trial, because a lot of what you need to learn as part of the Power Platform, we can only really do when you've got that hands-on sort of experience. We'll look at the business value of the Power Platform, what it can deliver for organizations if we're using it effectively, the core components within that, so things like Microsoft Dataverse, AI Builder, things like that. Then we're going to jump into, after a small break, some of the core applications. So Power BI, how we can use Power BI to create sort of these really quite amazing business intelligence tools, Power Apps for our low-code business applications, Power Automate, so we can automate our important steps as a business, Power Virtual Agent when we need sort of virtual chatbots that, again, are fully automated without the human involved. And then we'll finish off with a bit of a Q&A at the end in case anyone has got any questions. And as I say, 2 breaks we can hopefully try and just squeeze in just to basically get rehydrated, comforted, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, next slide, please, Carl. So your session leads for today. So hi, my name's Griffin. I am a director and principal consultant of a small Microsoft Gold partner here in the UK, Solar Cloud Solutions. I get involved quite a lot on the technical side of the Power Platform, and also things such as Dynamics 365 and Azure and things like that. Blog quite a bit about exams more generally. Quite a big badge hoarder, as you can see on there. It's quite addictive actually once you get started. That's what I find anyway. And I'm more than happy to sort of connect with any of you on Twitter or LinkedIn after the day. Just feel free to reach out to me. I can give you any helps or tips so you can make the most success out of your PL-900 learning. So over to you, Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl Cookson. So I'm probably at the opposite scale about organisations. I work for Avanade, who's one of the larger Microsoft partners across the world. I used to be a developer, and I pride myself that I'm not a developer anymore, but I do quite a lot of blogging on subjects, XRM Toolbox mainly, and other things that of interest to me. Definitely not. I don't really mind what food I eat, as long as you can see by my waistline. I don't have as many badges as Joe either, but when I was doing this slide, I realised I do have quite a lot, and like Joe was saying, it is very addictive. You can again reach out to me about this or any other subject that you want to talk to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Those are the handles there. So there's a few things that we've got to remember today. Don't forget, all these exams that we're going to do, we can't give you direct access to the content of the exams. No one is going to give you that. No one, even if they say they're going to give you that, it's nowhere near that. And if they are, they're breaking NDAs. They are going to be very short-lived. Those exam dumps and etc. Don't ask us about those. We're not going to get anywhere on that today. If we're not going to respond even to those questions today, we are going to be if you want to discuss questions about the exam, we have to do it in a very neutral and very non-specific way, rather than actual exams that are going to be questions from the exam. And do remember that all your exams are random as well. So it's making sure that you've got enough of a tool set to go into the exams with confidence. Like I was saying, these questions that you'll get will be random, and we are providing the content from our experience, from our Microsoft certified training information that is available, and any other things that we're going along our way that we think is covered by the skills outline, and this is the key for you today to make sure that you understand. And if you saw from the agenda, those levels of the skills outline are what each of the core topics are going to be today. Please be kind and courteous and considerate in the chat, but please ask us questions. So raise your hand or ask a question in chat, and one of us, whoever is not presenting, will be monitoring that. And use that skills outline, like I've already said. Make sure that you're really addressing your whole experience of these exams and learning around that skills outline, because those are the things that are going to really drive what's in those exams, and they change. So they've got a recent update in March 2021, and a lot of that is terminology with that Dataverse change with the tables, entities to tables, etc. But there will be content changes, so make sure you're well averse on those what's in that latest skills outline before you take the exam. But to start us off and to make sure that we're all able to crack on and put this into practice and to learn and to get hands dirty in these things, we're going to step through setting up a Power Platform trial. And the essential reason for this is these exams are meant to show that you have a experience and practice in doing the concepts that they're testing. So you can create a Power App, you can create a model-driven app, you can create a virtual agent or whatever else it is, and you know where these things are in the applications, you know the URLs to go to, you know the considerations you have to take. So it's essential that you get your hands dirty here. And what we're saying is practice does make perfect. Joe and I have been doing this for quite a few years. But to start your journey, you need to make sure you take the time and consideration and get your hands dirty and in an environment that you can play with. Because you want to, just like Jordan here, you know, he doesn't get as good as he was with just practicing half an hour every month. He practices and practices and practices all the time and making sure that he gets it right. And this is what we're saying to you, to make sure that and you're getting the right sort of hands-on experience in these things. And this last one I love, and there is a link. The quote is from Henry Ford. So you are going to make mistakes. So make sure that you're learning from those mistakes, but do it in an environment that is not your work's production environment. Is in an environment that doesn't really matter. And that's why trials are great. They give you a separation from that work account. So whichever company you work for, the trial will be nothing to do with them, which means that you have more freedom, more and certainly less restrictions that you would have if you're in your work tenant, and rightly so. So if you want to post all your work information to Twitter, I'm hoping that your work account wouldn't allow you to do that, but your trial will. So you can get hands dirty on those things. If you want to be able to make sure that you've got all the bells and whistles with Power Virtual Agents, etc., and you're not worried about the cost, then get a trial and have a play with it and use it for that month that you get. And you can add email and Teams to these accounts to allow you to experiment and understand those environments as well. But to start all this, and I'm going to go through it now, we just start with an incognito or in private mode. And I'm just going to drag over a window. So the other thing that is a good idea, and it's great, I'm using Edge here, but you've got the multiple profiles. So what I tend to do, and you'll see that I've got quite a few, I've got my work accounts, I've got my MVP accounts, I've got my blogging accounts, etc. They're all different profiles. So what I'm going to do is just add a new one. And this is basically blank. This is a new environment for me. And it's the same as if you did an incognito or in private, but it allows me to save my password. It allows me to do lots of different things with it. And all I'm going to do is walk through the process. So all I'm going to go to is the trials.dynamics.com. And down here, there's this little sign up here link. And we're going to use that one. We're not going to bother with any of these bits because we're a bit better than that. And then we're going to do the no continue signing up because we're not a partner or a Microsoft employee. But I do need to give them a proper email address. This is my personal email address. And you can see that it says that I've already got an account. And do I want to use that one? And I don't, because that's already been bombarded with demos and trials and etc. So I'm going to set up my account, and I'm going to give myself a name and give myself a phone number. Please don't spam me. And I need to do the plug for. No, it doesn't. Oh, why is that not working, Joe?
Do you do 4-4?
Okay. Yeah. One, two, three, 4, 6.
GDO as well.
Anyway.
440. Try that. Shouldn't need it.
No, it's not letting me now. No, that's the first tell, isn't this? Is working yesterday when I did it.
Changed it overnight, isn't it? It's always the case. Do I try my number?
I get to spell my home number now. No, that's not even worse. Let me just change the. That's what I did wrong. Oh.
Yeah, try now.
There you go.
There we go.
This company name is used as a label, so if you don't have to have your real company name at this point, you can just have in anything. So I'm just going to do that. So, and we've only got one employee in this, and I need to put a last name in. And then it's going to basically ask me to make sure that I know who I am. So it's going to send me a little text, which I'll hopefully get. My signal's not so. There you go. 93. Verify. And then this is where we are starting to get into some personalization. So we can start personalizing it, and this is what we're going to log in as. It starts with the bits that you need to remember. So I've started to create this new environment that's got this the postfix of on Microsoft.com, but this is the label that we're going to use and carry on with. And I'm just going to create the admin account. So these definitely are the bits that you need to remember. Use an email, etc. that you need to write down, and a password that you can write down, and then we just hit sign up. So say we've got to a point now where we've got a customized environment for me. It's allowing me to get to that point where I've got an environment. It's going to sign me in. And because I'm using the profiles, I can save that password now, so I don't have to remember it even. And I've now got my username. I'm just going to copy that in case I forget it. But then it gets started now, and we're going into the Power Platform Admin Center. So this is one of the URLs that you'll use quite a lot at admin.powerplatform.com. But on this right-hand side, it's now prompted me for a new environment. So I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to keep it on that. And we can then create a database in that. So we need to basically create a trial, and then we choose URL. You can see the prefix here. This will be different depending on which region you're in, but the UK region is 11. I can change the currency here, and I can deploy sample apps and data if I want to. But I don't really need to do that if you just want to start from scratch. It depends on if you're learning, you might just want to deploy everything. but for ease, etc. Now we can just do that with nothing, so we get the out of the box experience. The security group here as well, if you are linking it to your work environment, you can restrict the users of a security group within the active domain area to access this environment, so that you can have a new environment that only certain people can see. You might have a finance environment versus a sales environment, etc., or your internal IT environments, etc. So useful there, but not needed for us today. And that's about it really on this. I'm preparing my instance now. So now I've got a Dataverse environment that I can then go and use the full capabilities of Power Apps, Power Automate, virtual agents, etc., and readily use that throughout your testing and trialing. It only lasts 30 days. So if you do want to continue with your trials, you have to take out a new one. You can get that extended, but typically it doesn't really need it. I would suggest that you learn on an environment and decide which bits of that environment you want to take with you, and create solutions, etc., to bringing those, which will stand you in good stead for moving forward in your developments anyway, but it allows you to swap between environments. And it gives you that knowledge and understanding of solutioning and building up those things, because it's an essential skill when you're building those things up. So now I'm ready to go. I've got my SAP D12. I got that wrong. That should have been 21. And you can see that if I now go to another key URL, .powerapps.com, I should be logged in. I'm just going to skip the ads. The other part of this that is essential is that you choose the right environment. This default one never put anything in there, and that goes for anything you're doing. It's used for SharePoint apps and bits and pieces, but if you're starting from scratch, then just use the one that you created, because there isn't going to be a database against this. It's going to be very difficult to move things in and out of. So I'm going to swap to the cert Saturday 12. You can tell I've got a little warning that I've got 29 days left, but you can then see that on the tables, I've got lots of tables, which is the default data model for a Power Apps, a Dataverse environment. And then I can then go and create or add new tables, etc. And we'll go through that when we're going through Dataverse. Okay, so that is your 30-day trial. It's not linked to anything I've done before. So all of this is going to be no data is found. So there's no active, like I can change, we'll go through this all later, but there's no data in this environment. There's nothing. So it's nice and empty, nice and clean, nice and fresh start for you to do whatever you want to do in it. And you've got no restrictions. I can go and create chatbots and AI builders, etc. And we'll go through that as we're progressing today. But we should now all be at a point where we've got that trial environment, and it is essential to get to that place where you're hands-on with the environment and making sure that you're I need to get back to my slides. Making sure that you've got essentially enough information to drive your training and your testing. There is another small what I do here. There's a community plan if you which you can sign up for, and I'll find the link and stick it in, which is it is a Dataverse environment, and it is meant to be for people learning and involving themselves within the learning, etc. The things, there are more restrictions on there, like there's things that still will have a trial on them, like PVA, etc. But it is a never-ending trial. The only caveat to that is that you can't get things in and out of that one as easy. So you need to, you're only on your own in that environment. You can't invite a friend. In this trials.dynamics.com, you've got 25 licenses, so you could invite all your work colleagues in to have a look, etc., and test it, etc. You can set up all those configurations. You can go further with both of those to give yourself set up an E5 or an E3 Microsoft Office trial, so you can have email and Teams and create trials for all of those things. And trials.dynamics.com is your source for all of that. Right, so Joe, over to you, I think, which is describing the business value.
Yep, thank you very much, Carl. Yep, so just give me a second while I get sharing. I think there's a question in the chat just while I'm doing that.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand that one. Let me find my environment again.
I think it's when you're setting up the trials, there's a few different options, isn't there, Carl?
Yeah, sorry. Let me find it. Which? When you go to, you'll get this little prompt here. Yeah, so on that screen there, Soraya, let me go through it again. There's a link down here, which is sign up here. Are you signing up on behalf of a customer or using for trial or development purposes? Sign up here, because all of these other ones are pre-built, predefined experiences. If you just want something to muck around with, there's a little link a bit further down from your picture, which is sign up here. And then we skip this one by doing no, continue signing up, because we're not a partner or employee. There are links. Chris Huntington has done a good video of going through this, and I'll find those and put them in the chat as well. I think there has been several different versions. Ryan.
Yeah, Chris's videos. I think it's still broadly the same in terms of the steps.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The consideration is nowadays you're getting into this after you've configured and done that first page, this page, and gone through this process, you get thrown into this area, which is creating your new environment, and you can either try do the full Dynamics 365, which is that trial subscription box, which is Dynamics 365 sales service, field service, etc. Or if you just want a trial, then you can select that little trial one as well, which will be a cleaner environment effectively.
Okay. But the session is also being recorded as well, so just watch out on YouTube after the fact, and then obviously you'll be able to watch Carl back doing the steps. And then any problems from there, feel free to give us a shout. We can help you through it if you need it. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and we're going to look at basically the first area of the exam. So the exam is always structured around what we sort of term these skills measured, and these basically are just the topics which you need to demonstrate sort of knowledge of in order to be hopefully get a passing grade on the exam. So the first topic contains quite a few different skills that Microsoft are looking to validate your knowledge on. First of all, we just want to Microsoft want to make sure that you're able to effectively describe the value of using the various different Power Platform services, and that can be demonstrated by sort of doing some of the core tasks on here in terms of creating the flow in Power Automate, which we'll see later on, building solutions, things like that. You then need to also demonstrate, okay, how can you actually extend out an existing business solution by using the Power Platform? So it could be your organization is using things like Dynamics 365, using Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Azure, and things like that. So you need to be able to sort of describe at a high level how you can sort of incorporate the Power Platform alongside those. Because really, what we want to be doing, the Power Platform is really great at being able to build us these business solutions, but sometimes we need to borrow from other areas on the sort of the Microsoft stack, and this is one of the areas that potentially you can do quite a lot potentially with. It's not just a case that you have to stick solely in Power Platform. Use what you've got in the wider stack to be able to help you along. And then finally, you need to have a good awareness in terms of, okay, from an administration and security standpoint, okay, how does the Power Platform actually work? So, as an example, how do we, implement effective security? How do we log in as users? How do environments work? How do we manage our apps and users? How do we make sure that we avoid the situation that Carl referenced earlier, where you may accidentally tweet out your entire client list to Twitter by accident? Using data loss prevention policies, we can hopefully mitigate against that. And ultimately as well, making sure that we're building a platform that supports privacy, and most importantly as well, building solutions on top of it which are ultimately accessible. Accessibility is really a key thing that we need to be driving towards with these solutions, making sure that as many that we're catering to as many different users as possible, and using the tools that we've got in the Power Platform to get us there. So these are some of the things we're going to look at. So I've got some slides to get through first, then we'll jump into the Maker portal and look at some of these concepts in a bit more detail. So the Power Platform then. So what is it? Okay, we've talked about it so far. Hopefully some of you may already have a bit of awareness of what it is, but it's worth just restating it in very sort of clear terms. And effectively what we've got here is a sort of a low-code business application platform that we can use to build out various different solutions targeting different areas or different functions of our business. So whether we want to have a really nice, beautiful dashboard for our users that can sort of show up core business data and allow us to unlock insights with our data. We've got tools there within Power BI to have that really sort of effective business analytics tool. We can have reports, we can have dashboards, we can share that out to other users, we can track important metrics for our business. All of that and more is what we've got within Power BI. Now, the Power BI dashboard is only going to be effective if we've got good data going into there, and ideally we need a mechanism for people to actually enter data and to sort of work with the our core business data each day. And this is where Power Apps comes into the equation. So you can sort of think of them maybe as sort of like a next generation, cloud first sort of replacement for things like Access, for example. They're really sort of designed to be able to build those sort of rapid applications, which can either sit on top of Microsoft Dataverse, which we'll go into in a bit more detail in a little while, or indeed connect to any other data source that your business may be working with. So if it is the case that you're working with, other Microsoft tools, maybe SharePoint, maybe SQL Server, it could be that you're working with third-party products such as Salesforce, you're working with SAP or Oracle. Power Apps can support that, and you can effectively bring the data in and have your core application sitting in Power Apps instead. And really, in terms of from a development standpoint, it's sort of often touted as being sort of equivalent, sort of building a PowerPoint slide deck. I mean, when you get into it, there's you can potentially do some quite simple but quite sort of amazing things, really. But ultimately, what you've got around this is a formula language which you refer to as PowerFX, which allows you to build out these sort of formulas that can do things in your app, and they're very similar to Excel-based formulas. So if you are a bit handy at the moment, working with Excel, you built a really good spreadsheet with lots of different formulas in there. There's a really good chance that if you look at Power Apps, you'll be able to hopefully translate some of that across in an easy way. Now, moving on now, so a key concern for any business is obviously automation where we can. We don't want people to be sort of spending time on processes that take really sort of step-by-step processes that take hours each time to sort of complete. If from a system standpoint we can automate that, we can hopefully free people's time up to do better things with their time, in simple terms. So to help us in that objective, we've got Power Automate to be able to allow us to create these sort of workflows between our different systems. So whether we need to have an approval workflow, whether we need to trigger specific actions in other systems based on when a record is updated or created in, let's say, Dataverse as an example, Power Automate is going to allow you to sort of do that. And using Power Automate, you can build these sort of cloud-based flows that can sort of execute your logic. And a recent addition as well is something called Power Automate Desktop, which lets you build what robotic process automation or RPA flows. So this is where you sit down at a computer and you sort of record your steps one by one, So go into this application, copy this value on here, email this person. You can record all of that and then either sort of run that in a sort of an attended mode or even unattended. So again, hopefully taking what may be a particularly complicated process and fully automating that so that people's time are freed up for more important and useful things, hopefully. Now, moving on now. So when you're probably all familiar with an experience when you go onto a website, you typically have, let's say, a chat bot on there, or like a little thing at the bottom where you can maybe speak to a support agent or get some help with a particular product. And these are really great tools that we can use, to hopefully drive that engagement with our customers. But sometimes it can be impossible to have somebody sat there 24/7 monitoring that. Sometimes we might want to automate steps of that. Maybe we want to provide it so that only if we can't get a bot to sort of resolve it for us, that's when we then pass it across to somebody who can then look at it and take it forward. So really, Power Virtual Agents helps sort of meet this requirement by giving us these intelligent chatbots that we can very easily incorporate as part of our existing website or within our internal systems such as Microsoft Teams as well. So it allows us to build out these workflows as sort of a drag and drop interface that we can use to sort of build that out. Really sort of reduces the complexity around building out these sort of tools, and you can then incorporate it very neatly across the Power Platform. Now, underpinning all of these tools are three things which all of them sort of use to sort of some extent, more so than others in some cases. The first is data connectors, and we've already touched upon this already in terms of all of these tools in here, not just Power Apps, but Power BI, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents as well. They all support the type of connectivity that we already spoke about. So whether you're working with first-party Microsoft applications or indeed third-party systems, there's a really good chance there's going to be connectors available there that can help you sort of bridge the gap there. And if you can't necessarily do that, then you've got the ability, as potentially as a developer, to go in there and extend that out yourself, bring your own connectors into the platform so that realistically you can connect to any potential system that you want to work with. Moving on now, so for situations where you need to have sort of you want to use sort of off the shelf AI models to sort of achieve common tasks. So a good example could be, okay, you want an AI to basically process documents, invoices that are coming into your business. You want them to scan those each time, extract out the core details, and then save that into your Dataverse database. You've got models within AI Builder that you can consume very easily to be able to sort of meet those core requirements. And there's a whole range of different models that are available that you can sort of experiment with further. You can sort of train it against your own data to make sure that you're getting the results that you sort of hope as part of that. And ultimately, again, around that, try and maybe take out some of the manual steps that may be involved, when doing, tasks such as, processing invoices and things like that. And then, okay, so, and finally then, so if indeed that you've not got an existing database that you're working with and you want to actually bring your data fully into the Power Platform, then the final thing that we can use is something called Microsoft Dataverse. So this was previously known as Common Data Service and may still be referred to that, both in terms of documentation and perhaps even for the exam itself, just keep that in mind. But the Dataverse is basically just a managed database in the Power Platform that we can use to model out our business data. So we can create our various different, business objects, our data tables that we're storing in there. We can add on our different columns. We can create views for our data. We can add on business rules to sort of make sure that data is being entered correctly. There's a whole host of features that we can sort of use there. And really, again, we don't necessarily need to sort of get a proper sort of database developer involved in order to basically build that out. So Pranav's got a great question in the chat. So what is a database? So a database is what we generally describe as something that can, hold data. So typically, there's many different types of databases available. The most typical one that you will probably come across is what we call a SQL database, and that is where you have sort of defined tables of data within there. So in the example that Carl showed earlier, we saw in his instance he's got tables in there called account, contact, etc., things like that. So these are basically tables are in effect sort of our business objects that we work with. You know, they describe a particular category of data that we're most interested in capturing. And ultimately, we can use a database to be able to bring this, the data that we want to store together into a sort of a managed fashion, so that we're not using Excel spreadsheets as an example to record and store that data. And then around that, we can bolt on whatever logic that we want to be able to work with our data, you know, on a day-to-day basis, incorporate it into other applications such as Power Apps or Power Automate and things like that. So I hope that's answered your question there, Pranav. Okay, so we've touched upon some of this already, but let's dive in and look at a little bit more detail around the different solutions in the Power Platform. So Power Apps. So this is all about building these bespoke business applications that we can consume not only from our web browser, but also from our mobile and tablet apps as well. So when we're building Power Apps, we typically are focused on building two kinds of Power Apps. The first is what we call sort of a Canvas app, and these are for situations where we've got these sort of very sort of task focused based applications that we need to do. You know, so maybe we need to have an app so that agents can go out into the field, you know, and as part of home visits they can record different data points about that and then feed that back into the office. That would be a really great candidate for a Canvas Power App. The other kind of Power App that you've got available is something called model-driven Power Apps, and these are for more for situations where you've got these data-driven applications that integrate very closely alongside Microsoft Dataverse. So it could be in the scenario that I mentioned a few minutes ago, you could have a Canvas app for the field agents to go out into the field, and then for the back office staff back at the home base, they could have a model-driven app that lets them view that data and manage it in a much more formal way. Effectively, the Canvas app typically has a more extended development cycle in terms of and you've got a lot more control over the look and feel of the application. So you can see in this example down here, we can add on pictures, we can do titles, we can change colors. A Canvas app will let us do all that. Model driven apps by comparison have a much more structure around them. There's generally a general look and feel that you can modify to a certain extent, but they generally fit within a defined structure that we can sort of tailor around to a limited extent. And ultimately, through both of these application types, our model-driven apps, our Canvas apps, we can consume these across both web and mobile. So even model-driven apps can be worked with from the mobile if you wanted to. We can embed these alongside other applications within the Power Platform, or indeed other systems as well. So regardless of the type of application that we want to build out, we've hopefully got something here, you know, with Power Apps that we can hopefully leverage. So Power Automate then. So as we mentioned already, this is all around automation and integration, getting your business processes mapped out fully within the Power Platform so that you're not having to, you know, do things manually. You know, when you're doing things manually, as we mentioned already, it takes time, you know, it's tedious. And, you know, the thing I like to say is that, you know, machines are perfect in their very nature. Humans are imperfect. You know, they're always going to be prone to sort of human error as part of doing any sort of process. So if we can map that out correctly, get a machine to do that, then hopefully we can reduce the risk of maybe something going wrong, perhaps. So regardless of the type of automations that you want to perform, whether it's a simple, okay, just send me an email when I get a new lead into my business so I can obviously follow that up as a customer, or if you've got really sort of advanced scenarios that maybe, you know, traditionally you might need to, you know, write out using code, using C# or Python or something like that, then potentially Power Automate can meet that requirement. So you've got various constructs in the tool that you can use to help you build out these advanced scenarios, so branches, loops, and things like that. We can trigger our flows based on specific actions. So in this case, we can see on the screenshot, when we get a brand new email through, that'll be what triggers that out. We can change this to different types. So when a new record is created in a system, when a new, we can change it so that it runs on a schedule. So, once at midnight, run this batch process for us. And ultimately, we can loop in the mobile application that we've got for Power Automate, so that we can streamline our approval flow. So effectively, when a flow runs, we can get a notification through to a phone here, and this will then let me approve it straight on there, and then we can then process additional logic from there. So regardless of the type of existing automation tools that you've got in place, it could be they're using something like maybe BizTalk or something like that, or if you're just starting out for the first time, you can ultimately use Power Automate to hopefully help you on your way. And via the tools and the capabilities that we've got on there, you don't necessarily have to restrict yourself to cloud-based systems as well. So if you've got legacy on-premise business systems that you want to use and leverage, then you can potentially take advantage of those as well and bring them into Power Automate. So Power BI. So this is all around, as I mentioned already, business intelligence, getting the core insights from your data. And again, regardless of where your data is coming from, you can bring it together into a consolidated view and just get that single, we talk a lot about having, a single customer view as a business, and this is what Power BI will let us sort of do. So regardless of what type of view or what type of insights we're looking to generate from our business, hopefully we can use Power BI to support that objective. So if we're looking for more sort of ad hoc analysis, whether we want to have sort of natural language, a capability, so we can literally just type out the data that we want to see, Power BI is going to support that, and we get these really nice looking interactive reports and dashboards that we can consume across both web and mobile to get us to what we need. And it all looks really nice. It's all really quite intuitive. And ultimately, if we wanted to bring in Power Apps as part of this as well, we can embed a Power Apps into our dashboard. Literally as people are working with the app, the data will just sort of update behind the scenes. And ultimately, embed it across other applications in the Microsoft stack. So maybe have it so that we've got a dashboard or a report in our model-driven Power App, have a report that's embedded in Microsoft Teams. We've got various options on there that we can use to bring that together. Power BI is always a really great tool, and obviously generates quite a lot of excitement when people use it, which is always really nice to see. So chatbots then. So yeah, so we talked already about the scenario where you may want to consider using these. So this is around taking away the dependence on a subject matter expert, and you're bringing it into the sort of the Power Platform a bit more. So really, what you want to try and do here again is reduce that reliance on, let's say, an individual, somebody sitting at the other end of a website answering questions from a customer. If we can try and automate some of this process, get customers the information they need, but also make sure we're delivering a great experience as part of that, all the better really. And ultimately, as when we're working with the Power Platform, we can do this without needing to rely on data scientists or developers and have to go through an extended development cycle to bring that out. So we enable the virtual agent, we can integrate that across different services, across our website, add it into our internal systems if we want to. And as people are sort of working through the various different questions that we define on there, we can then trigger logic based on specific answers that are that are sort of being provided by our customers. And ultimately as well, we've got tools within this to be able to sort of just, keep an eye on this, because, we want to just make sure that, okay, people aren't getting frustrated by the bot. We want to make sure that people are getting ultimately the information that they need. So we've got some really great metrics and analytics within the tool that we can use to be able to understand all of that and get to a really good point with, with our chatbots and things. So Dataverse then. So yeah, this is all about having this managed database, as I mentioned already, really just allowing us to jumpstart our development. So instead of, as I say, getting a developer involved to build out a database from scratch and defining all the business logic and models and things like that, we can take away that dependency and give us a framework that allows us to very easily and quickly extend this out if we needed to. So really, you can extend very easily. We can pull data into as part of a model-driven app, integrate this across different apps and services. We can use Dataverse with the systems if we wanted to, just have that as our managed database there, and then just connect to it via, APIs and things like that. And then also alongside that, we've got this seamless integration across the sort of wider Microsoft stack. So you'll often hear about Dynamics 365 being discussed in the context of Microsoft Dataverse. So just to sort of explain that, effectively Dynamics 365 uses Microsoft Dataverse underneath the hood to store the data. So when you're using Dynamics 365 sales, customer service and stuff like that, you're essentially using the Power Platform Dataverse database underneath the hood as well. And typically from a Dynamics 365 standpoint, the Power Platform will be our first port of call when we're looking at custom extensions or things like that that we want to work with outside the system. So we've got a question in the chat from Paul. Is Dataverse a database or a connector to databases? It is a database. It is a managed database that Microsoft provided to you. Effectively, from a technical standpoint behind the scenes, it is a SQL database. It's a SQL Server database, but effectively Microsoft has given us the framework and the capability to basically just build our tables, build our columns on top of that, so that we don't have to write a bunch of codes, SQL scripts to basically create that each time. Hope that answers your question, Paul. So we mentioned already about the data connectors. So these allow us to connect to multiple different services and things like that. We can use these across Power Apps and Power Automate. If we are using some aspects of Azure as part of our solution, then we can also leverage Logic Apps as well. Those are more for enterprise type scenarios where we want to, where maybe we've got an existing Power Automate flow that we want to formalize and we want to extend out even further out into Azure. And as we've mentioned already, if we find that we've not got a custom connector available that sort of does the job, then we can get potentially a developer involved to build out a custom API that we can use. This will allow us to, extend out to publicly available APIs, custom APIs if we wanted to. Sorry, can you just bear me 2 seconds, please?
Sorry, when Joe's away, try and describe Dataverse. We are going to go into this a bit later. The idea of Dataverse is extrapolating and taking away all the administrative and costly infrastructure that you would need to create your own SQL database that could be expandable and connectable from across the world. So you imagine if you had a database that is can be connected to from any region and from any part of the globe, and you need to ensure that it's got the right level of interaction and security and all those good things that you would need to do. Microsoft has packaged all that up for you and provided you an interface to allow you to do that easily and create your own applications without worrying about any of that. And it does cost a little bit more than it would do long term, but there's no initial cost, and you're just paying for whatever you use and the licensing around that. So it is a very much a starter platform and an enterprise platform and anything in between, which has we use it. I use it every day across lots of enterprise, large banks and large charities, etc. Thousands and thousands of users, and it just doesn't worry about it, and Microsoft worries about it rather than you.
Thanks for covering that off, Carl. Apologies for that. Just had to go sort something out.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about custom connectors. Yeah. So as I said already, if you find that there's a particular system that the Power Platform can't work with, then it's very easy for us to build these custom connectors. We may want to get a developer involved to help with that. So I'm just going to mute. Just I was getting some feedback then. Yeah, thanks, Carl. So typically you may want to use custom connectors to sort of achieve that, and you would typically maybe get a developer involved, but we can actually go into the application. We can build out our custom connectors ourselves, or if we've got an existing definition or a Postman collection that we want to use, then we can sort of leverage that instead. So typically there'll be two different types of connectors available to us. The first will be sort of our tabular data connectors. This is where we're connecting to, let's say, Microsoft Dataverse, we're connecting to SQL Server, we're connecting to maybe SharePoint, things like that. So this is where the data will be structured as a sort of table in terms of it will have sort of fixed different columns and things like that that we can sort of refer to. And when we return that back, generally the format of that will always be the same. It will be in that structured sort of format. The second type is sort of function-based data. So this is where we use functions to interact with the data source. So maybe we need to do a post, we need to do a GET request to sort of, retrieve and update data from a system. So typically we may not be able to bring in these type of connectors into our, let's say, Power App, for example, because there's no way in which we can sort of represent that data in a tabular format. So generally, as I say, just keep in mind the different types of connectors and the different scenarios that they're more sort of catered for, really. Now, a connector effectively just describes a system that we want to connect to, but ultimately in most cases, we need to provide authentication details into that. We need to make sure that we have established a connection to that, we've secured that. And then from that, we can then typically have two different types of operations that we can use from that connector. Trigger, as we mentioned already, that will be what effectively kicks off, let's say, a Power Automate flow as an example. So when a record is created, when it's updated, when it's deleted, these are sort of typical types of trigger actions that you may want to perform. Depending on the system type, there could be others as well. And then the next type you have from there are actions. So that's where you've got specific steps that you want to do in that target system, based off a trigger action or based off from a subsequent action as well. And these will almost always involve some kind of interaction with data in the source system, as part of that. So I think just keeping in most cases, you'll generally find that most of the standard connectors that are available always have at least one trigger or and multiple actions around that. It really just vary on a connector by connector basis, and obviously with any restrictions that system has got around that. So Pranav, so a trigger is effectively a prompt. So it's when something that will then tell a flow to basically start. So as an example, if we were using the Dataverse connector, I could have a trigger when a record is created. That will then start off the flow. The flow will effectively listen for that event to happen, and then it will start off and execute its logic when it happens. Action will be a specific step that we want to perform into that system. So that will be create a record, update a record, things like that. I hope that answers your question there. And then finally, in terms of the options that we've got at a very high sort of level, we've got the ability of being able to do, manage our compliance and our privacy. So data loss prevention policies we can use to really make sure that, we're not putting the business at risk, because you can do quite a lot with a lot of these tools. They're all about unlocking innovation and hopefully getting the organization working a bit smarter. But ultimately, we do need to balance that with some, level-headed thinking. We want to avoid situations where we're potentially embarrassing ourselves or potentially causing a risk to our customers. So data loss prevention policies allow us to implement provide a framework to stop it so that a certain connector is being used. We can make sure that we're crafting sensible policies that we can that strike that right balance, as I mentioned already, and we can we'll take a quick look at data loss prevention policies and environments in a few minutes just to see what you can do there. So Microsoft as an organization has commitments to customers around compliance and data privacy. Out of probably all of the cloud vendors, they're probably very much a leader in terms of the various different regulatory compliance conformances standards that they sort of work to. Data protection is a key aspect of that, and also if you're working in Europe as well, GDPR compliance as well. And so the platform is very much built with these considerations in mind, and very much baked in as part of the core functionality that we've got available to us. So hopefully we can reduce some headaches there by being sort of assured from the outset that we're not going to be caught out at all. As I mentioned already, accessibility is key, and one of the major benefits that we've got as part of the Power Platform So we really want to be driving that inclusivity in terms of the solutions that we build out, using the tools that we've got around in the Power Platform to help us with that. So, if, for example, we've got, individuals in our organizations who maybe have, vision or hearing impairments and things like that, we can use, a Canvas app to basically help make that more accessible to them. We can provide, accessibility labels to that, which will support screen readers, and we can also get recommendations as well. So as we're building out our app as well, Microsoft will sort of, review that and give us suggestions on how we can improve our app to make it more accessible to users. So again, all of this together, we've hopefully got, a really expansive platform that can help us along in quite a lot of ways. So at this point then, just want to give you just a quick demo on environments, working with the admin center specifically, and also on how we can use data loss prevention policies as well. So just going to minimize my slides for a second. So you can hopefully see on here that I'm in the Power Platform admin center. So if you recall from earlier, Carl set up the trial, and then from there he set up his environment on here. So ultimately in the Power Platform, we can have multiple different environments. These will typically be tagged to a Microsoft Dataverse database, but we don't have to necessarily adhere to that. Environments effectively just provide us that separation. So if we're moving from development into testing into production, we can ultimately make sure that we're not sort of mixing the water there, and we've got some sort of structure as we're deploying things out in our particular environments and things like that. From a management standpoint, there's various different tasks that we can perform at the environment level. I can just go into settings and I can see I've got a whole range of different options that will appear around being able to customize email settings, integrations, enabling sort of feature level types things on there. Because this is a Dataverse environment, I've got the ability of being able to install additional applications. I can take backups. I can copy and reset my instance at any particular point. I've got all of the tools that I would reasonably expect to have to make sure I can manage this environment in an effective way. Moving on from here on the left, we can see we've got the ability of being able to view various different analytics data for our particular environment. So I can see down here that under Dataverse, I can access some interesting statistics about who's actually using this particular environment. We can see that, okay, what entities are being used the most for this particular environment. I can maybe change the filter. So maybe just want to switch it to my PL-900 environment over here, and we can see we get different data that's sort of shown over there, which is really great. We've also got different reports that cover Power Automate and Power Apps as well. So again, this is all around making sure that we are monitoring our compliance, making sure things are working ultimately, and particularly from a usage standpoint as well. For some of these tools, we need to just make sure that we're not potentially going to be caught out by any overage or things like that. We can go in here, we can view different details and stuff. If I just change the filter on this one to PL-900, we should see some flows in here. Yep, so we can see a couple of different flows that are set up in here and some data. And then finally, we've got the same for Power Apps as well. Capacity is an important consideration for any sort of environment. So we can go in and view our total capacity across different environments. So typically, this will be an important consideration if you're working with Microsoft Dataverse. Ultimately, we have set capacity around our size of our database, the size of the files that we store in there, and any log data that's associated to that. So we can see at the tenant level, in this case, you can see I'm consuming around 8.47 gigabytes of my total storage across there. And I can use this page on here to be able to manage that. I can get a bit more of a specific view across my different environments if I wanted to. I can see how Microsoft Teams is impacting our capacity as well, and also on whether people are actually using trial environments to sort of consume capacity as well. Data integration down here gives us some options around the different sort of tools that we can connect into. So we can sort of, if we're working with things such as data flows and things like that, we can sort of see some detail down there. And then data policies is where we would go to actually set up our DLP policies. So let's just go through now and just set up just a very basic DLP policy. So I'll just call this PL-900 test. So after giving it a name, we can then sort of define in terms of all the various different connectors that we want to potentially work with. So we can define what are business, non-business, and block connectors. So effectively, if I as an organization wanted to decide, okay, well maybe I don't want people, as an example, using Twitter at all across the organization, I can just mark this as blocked across the organization. We can see it goes across into here. I can click on the next button. I can set the exclusion policy. So all environments, multiple environments, or indeed just a specific environment. And in this case, I just want to block it for our particular PL-900 environment that we want to use on there. So I added that onto there, give it a quick review. And now what I've effectively done there is block that out completely from the tenant. So if I was to try and search for it and use that in our Power Automate flows, and we can sort of test that a little bit later on today when we look at that, we'll get a message telling us that it's been blocked on there. So it's really worthwhile spending some time familiarizing yourself with the admin center, the various different components that are in there, just in terms of just clicking around, just seeing the different types of information that you can get in there. And most importantly, just understanding the impact of your DLP policies as well. Because based on the skills measures, that is something that you will be assessed on in the exam. Okay, so just going to return to the slides just for a final one. So hopefully what we've been able to demonstrate here is just the amount of value that the Power Platform can really bring into the equation. So regardless of the type of scenario you're working with, there's going to be a tool there which will hopefully meet your needs to a certain extent. So whether you need a custom application, whether you're looking for that process automation, whether you just want to understand your data a bit more, whether you want to have these chatbots, ultimately whether you want to have these core set of features that can be really useful for you, you've hopefully got the tools there to be able to help you along. So at this point then, I'm going to hand over back to Carl, and he's going to take us through the core components of the Power Platform. Carl, over to you.
Muted. There you go.
Yeah,
I'm not muted anymore. Thank you very much, Joe. So the next bit on the skills outline, and we're just going to spend half an hour of this, and then we'll jump to a break. So get some refreshments, etc. Is the core components, and there's quite a few different parts of that, but the first one is just describing the Microsoft Dataverse, and you can see here the list of things. So we're going to go through how we manage that, how we create tables and columns and relationships. We're going to look at solutions, briefly go into business rules, describe what you get out of the box, which is the common data model, and understand why you should be reusing these things rather than creating your own. So Joe's already gone through this, but the core bit for this half an hour is those three bottom areas here. It's Dataverse, AI Builder, and data connectors, and we're briefly going to go into each of those areas. And these are the fundamentals and the building blocks for all the rest of the applications, all the nice WYSIWYG look and feel and virtual agents and all that great stuff relies on that bottom layer, either using the Dataverse database that Microsoft provides you to store your data and read your data, or connect to an external system using the data connectors to go to your Salesforce environment or whatever else, or your SharePoint, etc. And then use this AI builder, which is essentially the extension of using the AI AI configuration intelligence that Microsoft provides either on your data or standard components. Okay, so rather than go through more slides, I'm going to jump in and demonstrate, and I'm going to demonstrate on that environment we created just a minute ago. So this is the environment that we've created, and on this list I'm in make.powerops.com, And like I was saying earlier, and Joe reinforces really, the idea of an environment is essential here. So I'm making sure that I'm on this SAT 12. I made a mistake, like I said. And effectively, this is where you start. And this is your launch point for creating all your applications, all your AI interactions, your chatbots, even flows from here. There is another URL you can get directly to flows, Power Automate flows, but we can get to everything from here. And we can basically start from creating a Canvas app, model-driven app or portal from here. I can start connecting to my data from here, or I can start with some very simple templates where Microsoft have done some pre-canned business applications to allow us to start these things up, and you can bring those into your environment, tweak them, and make them specific to you, and then deploy them to whatever environment. And these templates are also a great way of understanding how these things hang together, so you can have a look at them and dig deep into them. But we're talking about Dataverse now, so we're talking about data. And the fundamental thing for data is on this left-hand side is tables. Now, tables are effectively like an Excel worksheet that you have got tables with rows of data and columns of information. And this is the same in the Dataverse in its most simplistic form. And effectively, it is a grid to allow you to enter things into. So if you take that to an extreme sort of an analogy, each tab on your Excel spreadsheet would be a table. So we would have an account tab, which would hold account or company or customer information, and we would then be able to amend it, add columns, add to it, so we could define different properties that we want to adhere to, and then we go from there to expand and understand and store our data. But because it's a bit more than Excel, we then have the principles of security. We then have the principles of speeding these things up with indexing and all these good things that Microsoft worry about, and we don't have to. So that is the fundamental for a table. It is a store of information. So and these are the standard ones you get with the standard Dataverse environment. Account being, like I said, a customer, a company. We're talking about Tesco or Abbey National or any of those things. There will be accounts, and it depends, and it will be the people or the organizations that your company sells to. And you can see we've also got other ones here. We've got contact, which is the individuals at those companies that you sell things to, and your organization might not deal with companies. It might just be a direct business to customer environment, so we can just use contacts directly. But you can see that here that Microsoft are providing a lot of the common structures that allow you to form up your data principles. So in terms of using account, if I've got a business requirement that does arrange around it being a logical grouping of company or customer information, I would reuse the account table. And that means that I get all the good stuff that Microsoft have already done, and I can quickly get to the point where I can get to what I need to change for my environment. And that's one of the essential tools that is part of that profile in the exam is reusing the out of the box, the standard environment tables that are provided. And it doesn't mean that I can't change it. If I want to call mine companies, for example, I can change it company and companies, and I'm done. So once I hit save table, that will whenever I see the company table, will have changed the name to company, so that it's personalizing it to my business requirements and my business needs. But there's always going to be the case where your business needs are different to everybody else's, and this is not the fact that nobody has done it before, it's just that it's not one of the standard tables. So what we can do back in tables is that we can create a new one, and let's just step through that process. So I've decided that I'm going to call myself this table called fault. You'll see that it's already given me a plural name. Because I've been naughty and not using solutions, I'm using the default publisher, everything gets this prefix. And this is basically making sure that when we move this table around in different environments, it's unique. So it's always going to be displayed as fault and false, but in the back end, the SQL table that gets generated is going to be that CR8AD_fault. And it's not something you tend to need to worry about or concern with, but it is just essential that you understand that it is unique to you. We put in the primary column here, so this is basically deciding on when I select a fault, what gets displayed in there, and I can simply leave that as the display name. On this right hand side, there's a couple of more options and more settings, and these are more complicated as you're going through, but just to show you briefly, this is doing exactly what it is. It enables this fault table to have attachments. I can bring in multiple attachments, and I can include multiple notes to this record, and we'll see that in a timeline. And there's even more settings down here. We can have a description, just a free format text. We can have a standard versus an activity table. So there is a concept of activity, which is usually email, fax, meeting, all those things that you do in Outlook typically. And your table might be one of those, but generally it wouldn't be. It would just be a standard table. But if you've got a new type of activity, might be an appointment for a fault or a resource booking or something similar, then you can use it as an activity table. Ownership is an interesting one, and that's going back to security. When you've got a user or team ownership, you're basically defining whether that record can be seen by other people within the organization, and your security roles, which we'll briefly touch on, but is not really essential for our understanding, will define who gets to see that. Or we can basically say this table can be seen by everybody in my organization, so I don't care who can see it. And that's good for tables like products or effectively metadata about things like service types or things like that are of that nature, where you don't really need to know who, no one takes ownership of them and everyone can see them. Collaboration. So these are another few extra bits and pieces that are coming from the Dynamics 365 world, but are available to you as Power Platform developers. Each one of these will enable a feature and allow you to add things to your forms. We can be able to send an email to the table, so that we will be able to enable this for sending emails to and from. We can enable SharePoint management. We can enable queues so that we can have these in a list of things to do. So cases, for example, would have a set of queues and a set of teams to be able to select from and choose between. And then we finally got a few things here down in the create and update settings. Quick create forms are used in model-driven apps to quickly create, and they are a cut down version of the full form to allow you to quickly generate the record. Duplicate detection, so there is a set of rules that you can establish to prevent duplicates being created. Normally for contacts, it would be the email address that you would establish as a duplicate. So if someone does try to create a new contact with the same email address on it, you would probably want to restrict that, because you want to have that single view of that contact. You want to know all the activities rather than having several Joe Smiths or Joe Griffins around. You want to make sure that you understand what interaction that person is having with everyone around there. Change tracking goes back to auditing your system and enabling your system for who's made changes to records, etc., and goes into that auditing that's a bit more over and above what we're doing here today, but it's just nice to know it's there. And finally, the offline, so you can make this application available offline and in the mobile application and within Dynamics 365, the Outlook, which effectively allows you to create an application once and deploy it wherever. Your Power Apps can be offline, and once you go online again, it will synchronize that data. So that's just enabling that for you. Again, well above the 900 level, but it's an understanding of the complexities, and it may appear as what can you do in the exam. So I'm ready to create my table. I'm just going to hit create. It's just saying here that there's a few of these options with where once you create it, you can't take it away. And that's just giving me that warning. So you can't unenable it for notes, etc. in this case. If you do want to do that, you would have to drop the table and start again. I'm just going to hit OK there. So you see that it's provisioning your table in the background. So all we've done is a few clicks here and we've got a table. We've now got a nice new table, and you can see here it's giving me a lot of the out of the box fields. So who created it, this fault, who created the fault, and who was it done, when it was done, who last modified it, and when and when. The owner, these owner fields here we just briefly talked about, and all these other things that we've got available to us, all out of the box, standard stuff that we want to be able to do. For the next step, we've created our fault table. Now we need to create our a new column within that table. So that's, if we're going back to that Excel, we've created the worksheet. Now we need to create, and we've created some of the columns along the way. Some of them we will use, some of them we won't. But we want to start thinking about what else we need to create against this fault table. So what I want to do is give it a name. What I'm going to do is give the ability to create what's happened with this fault. So what is the problem? And so I've given it a name. Again, we can change the physical name on the table on the SQL database that it gets generated, again with the prefix. But we've got an option to create lots and lots of different data types, column types. So each of these will give you different functionality, will give you different controls on your forms, etc., and will give you an awful lot of insight into how you use that and how you report it on. So text is pretty simple. All these are pretty self-explanatory. Auto number is one where if you're creating a case ID that you want to give to your customer, you can create different numbers for them to see. Numbers, whether it's whole numbers without any decimal paintings, or we've got decimal numbers down here with floating points, etc. We've got time zones that we can establish different time zones or languages, date and time fields. Choice and choices are basically lists of items that the user can select from. So like service category would be a good idea for a choice. And if that is applicable to more than one choice, we would then use choices so the user can select more than one. Currency is just directly linking back to the currencies. If we're using a numeric field to represent a currency value, dollars, etc. But in the back end, it is trying to. The system will have a base currency. So if you choose a different currency for your user, it will translate that and do a conversion. You have to manage the conversion, but it will do a conversion for you. Customer is a special field that allows you to link to both a contact and an account out of the box. It's not something you can change. It will always be a contact or a contact or an account. but it allows you to link to both of those. So for example, again, on the case, in our case of fault, you may want to link it to an organization or an individual of that organization, but in both situations you choose it from one field. Numbers we talked about. File is a newish one that allows you to attach directly to a record, a file. This goes on above what the secondary of attachments is, but it allows you to have an individual file. You can add an image as well. You can only have one, but if you see on model driven apps, there is like a logo, like the little logo here. That's the image file that we can add in there. Lookups we'll start talking about when we get to relationships, but that allows you to link records together to show you the parent and child relationships or whatever else we've got going on. So you can create that here. Multi-line text is basically what I want to do here, which is basically that block of text. Yes, no being the final one there is just as it says, it's basically a Boolean value between a yes or a no, or a true and a false, or whatever else you choose. You can choose the labels, but basically is a 0 or 1 within the database. But I'm just going to choose multi-line text and hit done, and we're ready. We can save a table. So now we've got my description field, I've got my fault, and I've got a name field, and I can quickly go and look at some data. No record files. So let's add a record. So this is all done for you out of the box, and I've not done a few clicks, and I'm ready to go, and I can give it a name, and I can hit save and close, and I've created my first record. Oh, I don't want to do that. Why is that happening? And now I can see that I'm now creating my first record. So that's basically showing me quite easily and quickly that I can create records. There is other options along here that I can import, edit the data in Excel. I can import data, export data, etc. I can start doing fancy things with data lakes and AI builders, etc. But essentially that's what the table is there for. And we've looked at the columns. The other principle within a Dataverse environment is, and I'm just going to go back to the slides here, is relationships. So we've already talked about accounts and contacts, and effectively saying that the account will have many contacts. So if you think that I am a contact for you as a customer, my an account would be Avanade because that's who I work for, and therefore there will be other people at Avanade that you may want to contact and get introduced to. So each account will have many contacts, and that's what we describe as a one-to-many relationship. One account will have many contacts, but conversely, many contacts will be linked to one account. Many contacts may be linked to a different activity. They may be linked to a single case, or a different, or any such things like that. And there's also, if we look at this in terms of our faults, we have one customer will have many faults. So one account, or whatever you want to label that, or a contact will have many faults. Over the lifetime of a contact, they will be associated with many faults, and they will record many faults with you. So you can see that here, that one customer will have many faults. Each of these tables will have their own information on them, describing what it's going to be. You can see that we've got a type and a description, etc. But each of these will then drive through to a relationship, and these lines are what we call the relationships. So depending on which way you're looking at this fault and customer, many faults will be linked to one customer, or one customer will be linked to many faults. But there is another type of relationship, which is a many-to-many relationship, and that allows you to say that to resolve this fault, I will need lots of different parts. And this is, I don't know why I've got that click to add text in the middle. That's just a bit random. That's me not checking my slides. So the many-to-many relationship allows you to do that where you've got one thing related to many. So each fault will be linked to a part. So I need this part to resolve this fault, and a second fault might be linked to the same part, and therefore you have a many-to-many relationship. So let me go back to our table and look at the relationships here, which is going along this top line. You can see out of the box, I haven't created anything, but you can see that we've got a few that are created for me. So there's a relationship between a fault and whoever created it. So me as a user, I would create a fault, and therefore it would be me who I created it. And the same with modified by, and I can quickly add a relationship. So my fault is going to be related to contact, he says, so that one contact will have many faults, which is what we described earlier. And then we have a lookup column display name, which is one of the columns that we saw earlier, so that we can put in the user ID, the GUID, to link those two things up together. So that's unique identifier of the contact record will be stored on the fault table. If you imagine each of those rows within the Excel, you would have a number on the left-hand side, but because we're talking about large numbers of records, we have a unique identifier, which is what we call the GUID, or the record identifier for each of those tables, each of those records, excuse me. So therefore, we're creating this many-to-one relationship between contact and fault, the other way around, fault and contact. And there's a few other options here. We can add a description. There's a few advanced options talking about whether, if we delete a contact, what do we do with the faults? Do we delete them as well? Do we just remove them, etc.? So there's a few other things there that you can tweak. But I'm quite happy to create that and save a table. And now I've got that relationships together and sorted. So the key for relationships is really making sure that you're not creating extra data for yourselves. You can really restrict the amount of data entry. So if you've got a fault that you know it's been logged by myself at my organization, rather than taking down my phone number and entering that every time, I would just link it to an existing contact, and therefore we can then see that information in various places, and we can also see that single customer view as well. Okay, now the next topic along the line, and we are going to be really struggling for time here, Joe, is talking about solutions. And the common data model was the other thing that I needed to show you. We've already showed you parts of the common data model, but that effectively defines, if we look at tables, this is the common data model. Anything apart from fault, which I've just added, in terms of the Dataverse, it's basically saying that these are the standard features of any organization, and it allows you to have that common language when you're talking to other external vendors. So Salesforce has the idea of an account, and it matches pretty much with the Dynamics version of account or the SAP version of account, and therefore we have that interoperability between those organizations. So it helps when we're doing integrations, it helps when we're doing Power BI, etc. So we know roughly what an account is and what we should expect on that table. And this is Microsoft's stab at it, and this is what Microsoft provides you out of the box as your core data model. So like I said, you know, industry standards of common things like opportunity and order, as well as account and contacts and case and all those sort of good things. Across the top as well, if I go into my fault screen, we have got business rules. if I quickly add a business rule, you can basically say that business rules allows you to at a form or a table level to configure auto generation of data, or restricting people's access to certain bits of information, so we can hide and show fields, for example, on the model driven form. So basically here we can basically say, with a rule, we can say that if the name equals Fred, just for simplicity, and for speed, apply. Then we can add a new set the value for something else on there, status equals to active. So basically setting up a business rule. So we're doing quick business logic that allows us to run these conditions and this logic. And up here on this right hand side, we have a scope, and you'll see that they haven't changed the label of this. So if you'll see that entities and attributes are used mixed in with tables and columns, and that's the old terminology for this sort of thing. But your exam should be in the new tables and columns. So if we have it on all forms, if we have it on the entity, we can then, when a record gets created, when a record gets updated, we can fire these conditions, and these conditions have to be met. But you are limited to things that are not visual. So you can't hide a field, for example, on at an entity level. You can only do that at the forms level, and this only applies to model driven forms, which we'll show later. So like this is here is, just defining simple table logic and levels of logic here. Solutions. So a core concept of sharing your applications and having a application lifecycle management is solutions. So we basically embed into solutions the bits that you want to share. You can then put that in from your dev environment to your test environment to your production environment very simply, and allow you to develop separate to where you're going to get the people to test, and then certainly separate to your production environment where your end users will be. And solutions allow you to package all that together and ship them around those environments. And there's two types of solutions. There's a managed and an unmanaged. So managed, you have control about what properties the next environment can do and lock it down, but it also allows you to remove that new table that you created and everything to do with it by removing the solution. If you have unmanaged, once you promote it to the next environment, you can't take it out without manually removing those things. And with managed, you also get this solution layering that goes on. It's well advanced for us, but just the idea of why we would have managed versus unmanaged. And I'll quickly just want to show you that down here. Under solutions here, you'll see that in my brand new environment, I've got an awful lot. I've just put in the portals, which I wanted to show you later. But there's an awful lot of things that are going on here that are all the solutions that are part of the out-of-the-box experience that Microsoft is working. It provides you. Excuse me. But if I create a new solution, I can then either use the default publisher, or I can create a publisher. So you can, if you're working for an organization, you would come to an agreement about what that publisher would be, so that you would know your components, and everything would be labeled with that prefix that we saw earlier, with that name, and everything would be given that tag. I'll just use the default one for now, and then we would hit create. So now I've got a nice blank solution, nothing in it. But what I can do here is add an existing. So add my table that I had earlier, which is default. And I can either include everything or I can include just the metadata. I'm just going to include everything for now. And that's basically added in my fault table and everything associated with it, so that when I export, I can move that fault table and everything I do on it to the next environment. And we should always be using solutions at this point, because it allows us to have that lifecycle management going on. And okay, I've still got connectors to do. And AI, we're going to really struggle, Joe.
Yeah, we might just have to just consolidate, just go at speed on some stuff. But
yeah, so connectors. So connectors are how we get data in and out, and Joe briefly described them earlier. We've got the idea that we've got SharePoint connectors, we've got Salesforce connectors, we've got all the things that Microsoft provide for us, as well as the connections to Dataverse, etc. And they're used across all of the applications, whether it's Power Automate, Power Apps, or Logic Apps within the Azure space and various other things. And it just allows us to connect to either a Dataverse environment or elsewhere. You've got email connectors, you've got Office connectors, etc. Or we can create our own. And what we mean by that is that we can create our own API. We can create it against our own infrastructure. We can have an on-premise API, etc. And we can create our own to allow us more complexity and more scale to our applications. This is just showing you that within our Power Apps, you've got these connections on the left-hand side, and we'll go through this. Joe will go through this. I'll go through this when we're going into Power Apps. But just the idea is that you've got the Dataverse connector, which will connect you to the accounts and the contacts that you've got within your Dataverse environment, whatever table you create. Or we can go through to Dynamics, OneDrive, or emails, etc. And we can connect all those things together. But there's also a differentiation there. There is the tabular data, which is your Dataverse, and similarly with your SharePoint, where you've got some structured data where you're going to get data, or you can have a connector that is basically doing something for you. So you can Twitter, for example, has that function-based connector where you can send a tweet. So you're providing it some information, it's going to do something for you, and you're expecting a response back. So that's all within connectors. And sorry. So, and there's also a trigger and an action for each of these. So each of these connectors can have a trigger, which is basically starting the flow within Power Automate, and allowing you to subscribe to that trigger and take an action once that hits. So for example, you can have a trigger against a Dataverse connector. So when a account is created, you do certain things within your Power Automate, and Joe will go into this later. There's also actions. So in that scenario where you've got a trigger of an account created, you may want to fire off an email to the sales director and allow him to know that a new account was created, and he may have to take an action or do an approval to make sure that all these bits and pieces are stuck together. Moving on quickly, I'm afraid. Let me just quickly show you AI Builder. So AI Builder here on this left-hand side is split into two things. You have got two areas here. You've got the models that you need to train, which are using your data to train. You may have a list of objects that you want to detect, and your objects are specific to you, your brand of cola, for example, and the variations in between, and therefore you want to train the AI model on that. Or you've got these predefined list of applications that you can quickly and easily get started on, reading business cards, or whether the text that you've got in there from an email is positive or negative. You know, if it's a negative, you might want to do something. And these are all the AI models. And these models effectively allow you to quickly and easily get information out of your data and use that for the next stage going on. So you may have a process which takes in a form, and you've got a picture there of your form, and you want to use that for order processing. And rather than generating and easily and quickly, you can take information in that form and pass it on to your next process, rather than having a human being reading that form and entering data and all the inaccuracies that come with that. So AI really is there to allow you to speed up that process and get to your improve that user experience when you're dealing with people and humans and doing their jobs, and allowing that your end users to be spending more time thinking about what they're doing rather than doing those mundane tasks. So it's very much quite easy for you to create a model, sentiment analysis, and we can then start using it within a flow or using it in an application to trigger these things. So it's quite an easy thing to do. It basically shows you here what whether it's a positive, negative, or neutral sentiment. But this is the information that we're going to basically if by tweaking this and changing this, we can obviously change the sentiment that it will be bringing back. But more importantly, we can use this within our applications to trigger, if we're having a negative sentiment, we may need to trigger something else in our workflow. We may need to create a case with a different priority, for example. And it's just making intelligent decisions on your data and being able to use them within your flows or within your applications to speed up that process. And I think that we've been through this, and pre-built versus custom, we've been through this as well. We can use pre-built straight away. We don't have to train it. Business cards are a good one there where you can easily do that. But custom is working on your data, so you would have to do entity extraction and keywords that you're interested in. And that has been a very rushed 40 minutes. I apologize for that, but I do think we need a quick 10-minute break. So suggest that we come back at 10:50, which is now 10:42, so 8 minutes from now, and then we can get cracking on
Power BI
the
next.
API, yes.
Yes.
Unless there's any questions, I don't see any.
No, I think we've answered most of them in the chat,
Okay.
hopefully.
Thank you, Joe.
So yeah, reconvene in at 10 minutes to.
Thank you very much, all.
just going to take the screen from you, Carl.
Cool.
Give it a minute and then, yeah. Lots to get through, lots to cram. So we weren't lying with the session title. Okay, so let's make a start then. So we're going to take a look now at Power BI, look at what we can actually do with this business analytics tool. So from an exam standpoint, a couple of things that you just need to be aware of. You need to be able to sort of identify what are the sort of the main components for different Power BI things. Julian's got his hand raised. Julian, do you want to stop us? Sorry.
Yeah, I saw that. I just messaged him, so
Okay,
carry on.
we'll carry on. Okay. So you need to be able to identify some of the core components from Power BI, what they are and what their use cases are. You need to understand how you can connect to and consume data. And ultimately, you need to know how to build a very basic dashboard using Power BI. So let's just dive in and look at this in a bit more detail. So we've already discussed what Power BI is. There's probably no need to really sort of repeat, apart from just saying that it is a business intelligence tool that you can use to bring in various different data, so you can have that interactive and scalable reports built out for your organization. There's various different concepts that you need to get your head around when it comes to Power BI. First of all, we've got this concept of capacities. So typically you'll have either sort of a shared or dedicated capacity that will be consumed as you're deploying out and using your Power BI reports. This will ultimately have a bearing on cost. Workspaces is effectively the sort of the container that you use to bring together your Power BI content. You've got two kinds of workspaces: your own personal workspace that every user has, and then shared workspaces, which are for when you need to have your reports shared or you need to have some element of collaboration around that. Data sets are your data. You bring those into your workspaces, you connect your reports to them. Shared data sets will typically be for where somebody has gone off and sort of maybe prepared an existing data set. So maybe they've done some work on the underlying model, they've optimized the data, made sure it's accurate, and then effectively they're providing that out for use across the organization. Reports are sort of pages of a particular, the container set of visualizations. They are completely different from a dashboard. A dashboard effectively brings together content from one or more different reports into an easy to view, easy to monitor type sort of experience. So I think really in terms of the workspaces, data sets, reports and dashboards, you really do need to sort of familiarize yourself with those core terms and make sure that you can differentiate between them when it comes down to it. To help you along with Power BI, you've got the ability of being able to install various different template applications. So if you have got working with an existing application system such as Dynamics 365, there may be a template app you can install. You just put in your connection details, and then from there you can connect to that and work with that at your own leisure. You can get data from a variety of different sources. So as we've seen already, many of the connectors that we've spoken about will also be available as part of Power BI. So whether your data is in Excel, it's in a SQL database, out in Dynamics 365, if it's in other competitor products such as Salesforce or Google Analytics or Facebook or things like that, we can connect up very easily, either through a dedicated app that company may provide, or just by using Power BI Desktop or the Power BI service to bring that data in. Now, the main way in which you would work with your Power BI reports, you build them out for the first time, is the Power BI desktop application, which we're going to take a quick look at in a few minutes. It basically just provides you the ability to be able to build out your reports, which you can then sort of work with locally. You can consume locally if that's indeed what you want to do, or you would then typically then deploy it out to the Power BI service so that more other people can sort of work with and interact with that. And really, this is the sort of the ecosystem that we've got here, which gives us that really flexible approach when we're consuming our Power BI content. we can get it out onto the online service so that people and maybe non Power BI experienced users can sort of consume and work with that. Ultimately, we could also get that out into the mobile application as well, so that on the go we can work with and interact with these reports. And ultimately, based on the experience that we're using, we can ultimately get everything can be sort of customized and tailored to sort of suit that. So for example, for the mobile device, we can make sure that the visuals are sort of loaded in a compact manner, as we can see down here. So instead of getting, trying to fit all of that onto a single view, we get a nice sort of streamlined view that we can just sort of scroll down and scroll through, which is really great. Now, modeling will be where you perhaps spend most of your time from a Power BI standpoint. So you primarily, as I say, use the Power BI desktop application to assist you in this regard. You would use the ribbon as your main tool to be able to bring data in. The canvas or report view will be where you're dragging your various different visuals. You can then add on different pages at the bottom. You've got a whole range of different visualizations, standard ones, but also ones that you can bring in. So if you can either install custom ISVs from Microsoft AppSource that maybe certain companies have made available, or indeed as a developer, we can go in and actually build our own visualizations. We can use R, we can use Python, we can use TypeScript to be able to build out custom visuals that then sit on top of our report. And then finally, fields, that'll be where you drag and drop in your various different data points that you want to analyze further into your visualizations. So these are the 5 areas from the desktop application standpoint you need to really familiarize yourself with. And then, as I've mentioned already, we've got all of these different visualization types listed on here. So these will cover probably most of your common requirements as you're working with the tool. And as I've mentioned already, you've got the ability of being able to bring in your custom visuals, either sort of approved ones that have gone through the Microsoft certification process and are available on AppSource, or ones that you have sort of developed yourself. So a lot of flexibility there, which is really great. Now, a report will typically be most useful when we can actually give people the ability to be able to change the data on there dynamically. And this is where slicers come into the equation. It gives us the ability of being able to allow users to sort of select different data points and change the whole look and appearance of the report based on the slicer values that we provide. And effectively, using slicers, we can filter content at the report level, we can filter at a page level, we can even just have a visual, a slicer for a specific visual. And then finally, around that, we can provide drill through capability. So, we may, from a map visual level, from a pie chart level, we may start at a sort of country level view. Using drill through or drill down capability, we can sort of drill through right down into even sort of postcode area or into city area, based on our particular needs. Now, transforming data is a key component as you're building out your reports. You would typically use the Power Query editor to build this out. So you bring your data in, use the Power Query editor to sort of transform it, maybe remove columns that we're not interested in, add on new ones, bring in other data sources. Typically, this is where you need to devote some time to make sure that you understand how you go about transforming the data using the query editor, and that you're comfortable in terms of working with the interface within that. We'll take a look at that in a few minutes. So typical tasks may include cleaning your data. So it might be you just want to remove maybe columns that have rubbish data in. It might be you want to transpose data, swap rows to basically format the data better. And we've also got the ability of various different formatting options. So we can maybe put data to uppercase, change the format of dates and things like that. There's a whole variety of different things that we can do. Then once we've brought in our models into the report, we can then perform various different out-of-the-box aggregations on our data, so we don't have to actually go off and do this ourselves. So if, for example, we want to have a sum or an average and things like that, then typically we can just drag the particular field that we're interested in into our visual, and the application will do that for us automatically, which is a big help. Okay, so security. So you would typically access the Power BI online service using the same login details that you've got for Microsoft 365 and for your other services in the Power Platform. At that level, you can sort of enforce different privileges over what particular users can do. You've got various different tenant level settings that you can enable and disable, so you can actually make sure that, okay, I want users, let's say, to be able to use data sets across workspaces, but I don't want them to create new workspaces, as an example. As a tenant administrator, we've got a lot of capability there to help us fine grain that, and obviously just make sure that we're giving the appropriate level of access that we feel for the Power BI service. And typically around that, as an admin, tasks that we may do from a administrative point of view is, okay, looking at our governance policies, okay, so making sure that people are not, accidentally sharing reports out to external users that contain all of our core financial data, monitoring our users, making sure that we've got the appropriate licenses assigned. If we're working with Power BI Premium or embedded within our solution, then we also need to monitor the capacity that's been assigned to that, and ultimately just make sure that we've got the right capacity allocated based on usage, and ultimately people are not having a bad experience because we've not estimated the capacity correctly. So data you connect to within the Power BI desktop application. You can work with it using the tab on there. We'll take a quick look at how that works in a few seconds. And then it could be that after you've worked with the data in Power Query, there's maybe some additional steps that you want to do. So we can use what's called, we can use a programming language called DAX to be able to create new calculated columns. We can even create calculated tables based on that. We can remove columns that we don't need anymore. There's no point presenting data to users if there's going to be no potential benefit in sort of showing that, keep things simple, keep it simple, stupid. It's a good acronym to remember. And then finally, we can sort of work with our various different queries. We can maybe consolidate those down into maybe just a single query, or maybe just only the queries that we care about. And we can model out our data using the relationship tab just to see, okay, how does our data fit together based on the various different links. Yeah, so this is again just repeating about the visualization, so we can just sort of drag and drop those onto there. Now, dashboards. So as I mentioned already, it's important not to get confused between reports and dashboard. Reports are what we typically build out in either Power BI Desktop or the service. They've got the multiple pages on, they've got the various different visuals that we add on. A dashboard is created only within the online Power BI service, okay? And it gives you the ability of being able to consolidate content from multiple different reports into a single view. So what we can very easily do is basically just pin on different visuals from our reports. We can rearrange it onto here, drag it around. We can bring in other content, so we can actually maybe add an image onto our dashboard. We can bring in streaming data sets. So literally, as we're on the dashboard, we can see maybe from an IoT device, we can see sort of, devices, the graph sort of updating automatically, which is really quite nice and interesting. So really just make sure you're clear in terms of the differences between that. And the best thing to remember is that, dashboards are an online only component, and they are designed to bring you that consolidated view from multiple different areas in Power BI. Now, typically, you want to share your reports out and collaborate with colleagues on them. If you're using the Power BI free, then you've got access to a personal workspace where you can basically host your content in there with some restrictions. You won't be able to sort of share out various different content within there to other users because it's in your own personal workspace. In that scenario, you need to just check your licensing to make sure that you can do that. If, though, that you've shared your content to a shared workspace, then other colleagues will be able to be involved as part of that and sort of work with that. So Mala's got a question about can we bring in YouTube analytics? I don't think there's a connector per se for that. I'm going to assume that Google probably does have an API for that, and you may be able to bring it in. And I think, Carl, have you found a pre-built app that they've got already for that based on the chat? Sorry, on mute, Carl. Okay, I think Carl's found something.
Yeah, sorry. There is a pre-built app, and Frederick's done the same as well. There is connectors there, so it must be possible. You have to do some research and some digging on that, but
yeah. But effectively, if there's not a connector available in Power BI, then you have got the ability of being able to connect to sort of just HTTP or web APIs. So provided that it's a RESTful API or it's a no data API, there's a really good chance that you can work with it and then bring it into your report if you needed to. Okay, so let's jump in now and let's have a bit of a demo of it all. So I'm in now into the Power BI online portal, app.powerbi.com, and we can see when we first land on here, we get a view in terms of just favorites and things like that that we can work with. And we can see that at the moment I've got some content that I've deployed out into my personal workspace down here. So I'm just going to click on to PL-900 demo down here. So what I've got here is a very sort of basic report that I've built out using data that's been pulled in from Microsoft Dataverse. We can see this is a fully interactive report that we can just sort of click into. As I click around the different visuals, I can see that this graph actually updates based on the data I'm selecting. So I can get a really quick and easy snapshot around the data that's in there. I can apply filters to my data on the right hand side. So if I wanted to maybe just say, okay, all I care about is Alpine Ski House, I can say I can adjust that view very quickly and we get the data updating automatically on there. I've got various options at the top, so I can sort of save a copy of the report, I can download it, I can maybe add a comment onto it, subscribe to updates. I can even also edit the report in the online portal. So if I wanted to bring in some additional data, so maybe I wasn't too happy with the visual types that are on here, I can maybe just bring in some additional ones sort of based on that. And ultimately, I can see all of my data fields are on the right-hand side here that I've sort of used to build out. And to basically build out this report, I've used Power BI Desktop to help me achieve this. So this is the same report that we've just seen on the online service in the desktop application. All I've done is just clicked on Get Data at the top up here, clicked on Dataverse. I've entered the name of the environment that I wanted to put in, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but if I go to recent sources up here, I should be able to see the same source that I connected to yesterday for this report. What it's going to do now is going to go off and query all of the data that's in my Dataverse instance, my database, and then return a full list of it down here, as we can sort of see. So maybe if I wanted to bring in, let's say, the account data, I can just click on that down at the top up there. I get a preview of the data that's going to be loaded in. I can then bring the data in. It will be loaded in down here for me automatically. And then if I wanted to, I can actually do some transformation of this data by clicking the button up here. And this is going to take us into the Power Query editor, which you can see on here. So this data has just been brought in pretty much as is. There's been no modifications to it. As you can see, there's quite a lot of different data that is in there. If I wanted to sort of say, okay, well, maybe I don't care about this created by field on here, I just want to remove it, get rid of it completely. It's not a concern of me. Created on, okay, well, the name of that is a bit rubbish, so maybe let's just rename that to something like this, perhaps, to make it a bit better. Maybe there's I want to do some stuff, like maybe add in a new custom column, maybe a flag field or something like that. I can do all of that at the top. I've got a few different options, as you can see. And as I'm building out my report, I can see on the right hand side that all of the steps that we're applying are sort of done as applied steps. So at any point, I can sort of return to the previous state that I was in by just sort of clicking on the appropriate step. So this is really great because it gives me that history. I can revert back and see, okay, what exactly has been applied to this query to get it into its current state. Or indeed, if I said, okay, well, I don't actually want to go forward with any of these changes, I can just click on the delete button and we can see straight away I revert back to how it was before we started fiddling about with it. So it's worth spending some time in the Power Query Editor mode, familiarizing yourself with the type of things that you can do in here, and just sort of, using that to build out your first sort of report. On the left-hand side down here, we can see our data model that's been brought out. So we can see for this buildings table, I've got 5 records that I've created in there. I've got a few more in this, about 215 rows in my visit data. Then by clicking the relationships view down here, I can actually get a graphical view of how our data is looking, including all relationships that are between it. In this case, the Power BI desktop application figured out automatically what relationships to add on based on what existed within Dataverse. So I didn't have to do any work here to sort of define the relationships. I can add on additional relationships if I wanted to by clicking Manage Relationships at the top up here. I can edit existing ones just by double clicking down here. As you can see, this is a many-to-one relationship. So in most cases, if you're working with Microsoft Dataverse or indeed any SQL-based data source, then Power BI will generally do a good job at being able to figure out the relationships and get it added onto the model automatically. When the report is ready to go and ready to sort of consume in the Power BI online service, it's literally just a case of just clicking publish on there. It will take a few moments to upload that onto the service. And then as we can see on here, this is how the report will look when it's all done. Now, the final thing just to have a quick look at is our dashboards. Okay, so I've got here's one I made earlier in true, was that Art Attack or Blue Peter car? I can't remember. Here's one I made earlier. Can never remember. But yeah, we can see on here.
Blue Peter, but yeah.
Blue Peter,
give me a nudge next time. That can find my mute button.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so yeah, so we can see on here that I've got content that I've pulled in from a specific report that we've been working with. I can sort of fiddle about with this to my sort of heart's content. Maybe I'm not interested in having this on my particular dashboard anymore. I can just delete it. I can then go down to my report down here. Any visual that I can see on here, we've got a pin icon at the top that we can just sort of hover over. I can sort of click on that, and it will then give me the option to pin that onto an existing dashboard. Now that's been pinned, if I go back to my Griffin Campus Management dashboard, we can see I've got my pie chart on here. I can then drag that around like so. I can then drag that up there. Maybe I want to bring in some additional content. Maybe I want to maybe add a tile. As you can see, I can bring in an image, web content, a text box. So maybe just do like a really rubbish text box as an example. Maybe just do, you know, PL-900 cramming, like so. Maybe just do that in bold. Just do like a crazy font on it or whatever. Apply. Yay, there we go. So we can just then maybe put that over there like so. So it's really nice and easy for us to be able to sort of fiddle about with this to our heart's content. What we've also got as well is natural language capabilities. So if I wanted to find out specific information about visits, so I can just, you know, maybe just click on the button up here. I can then start typing in different sort of questions for my data. It gives me some suggestion down there. So maybe I can just do, okay, I want to sort visits, visitors by name or by BC building name as an example. And what it does is it returns me a table view of that particular data sorted by a particular name. And then I can just sort of adjust that query based on what I've typed in. If this was a particularly useful view that I wanted to then bring into my dashboard, again, I can very easily do that by just clicking on the pin at the top, pin to existing dashboard, click on that, and we can see, there we go. There's our nice dashboard up there. So pretty cool stuff, and it looks really nice as well. You could spend all day with Power BI, I think. Yeah, as you see, I'm just fiddling about with this now, and I've completely forgotten what I'm doing as a consequence. But anyway, so final thing just to have a quick look at is the admin settings at the top. So if I just want to click on admin portal, let's just have a quick look at some of these settings on here, because you will need to have an awareness of this. So similar to the Power Platform Admin Center, we get some nice statistics on here about the various different ways in which we're consuming Power BI content across the tenant. Get that nice, really quick and easy view. User management and everything else is done via the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So you typically go into there. That would also be the place where you would then also license users for either Power BI Pro or Power BI Premium, whatever it may be. Premium per user is a fairly new licensing offering that's come out. The exam doesn't cover licensing specifically, I don't think, but being aware at a high level in terms of the various ways in which you can work with Power BI will hold you in good stead. Audit logs will be consumed via Microsoft 365 Center. And then down here, we can see the various different options that we can sort of enable or disable for our organization. So maybe, we're working in a sales-based organization. Maybe we're a bit worried about our salespeople just doing a dump of our prospect lists from Power BI. and taking that with them on the merry way. So we can just disable that, you know, either across the entire board, or we can sort of say, okay, well, maybe there's certain security groups that we set up in Microsoft 365 that we want to apply that to instead. So we've got a few options there. And pretty much all of the major features that we've got as part of Power BI, we can customize down here, and we can sort of enable and disable to our heart's leisure. We can also manage the various different workspaces that we've got set up on our tenant over here. So we can see down here, this one's got a few different ones across the board. So we've got all the various different personal workspaces that maybe people have got set up for themselves. We typically won't be able to delete those because every user must have at least one have their own personal workspace. We can't change that at all. But you know, if maybe somebody's gone in there and set up a workspace that we don't think is particularly very useful anymore, we can maybe go in and maybe just edit its details, or we can maybe then just go and have a conversation with that particular user, just to say, okay, do you want to keep this, or do you want to delete this, perhaps because it's making things look a bit messy on our tenant. So Power BI, it's quite a big subject. It's even got its own exam for what it's worth. For the purposes of PL-900, it's really just understanding the concepts at a high level and understanding some of the common tasks that you can do. So I'd encourage you after today to maybe just go in, connect up to Dataverse, bring some data in, create maybe a basic report off the basis of that, and then just deploy that out to the service and set up a dashboard for yourself. And from there, you should hopefully be fairly familiar or have enough sort of confidence then from the exam standpoint. So at this point then, I'm going to hand back across to Carl, who's going to take us through Power Apps.
Well, talking about a lot of content, this next section has a lot of content, and again, get your hands dirty, get doing it to show yourself the understandings and the capabilities. But I'm going to go through and try and describe all the bits that are in the exam outline and show you around Power Apps. So the first part of this is what are the different Power Apps, Canvas, Model and Portal, reuse all components, and we'll have a quick look at formulas as well. So what can Power Apps do for you? So we've been through this quite a few times, but it's a low code, no code platform for building apps. It's working with your data wherever it lies, so we don't care whether it's in Dataverse, SharePoint, Salesforce, SAP. I think I would care if it was an Excel spreadsheet, but in essence, anywhere your data lives, that's where it stays, and you don't have to worry about it in terms of governance, etc. But it allows you to show that app on a mobile environment, on your mobile phone, in the web, etc., and share that so you can create business applications quickly and easily. And you can also expand that to externally facing websites, so we can get at that data external to your organization for customer facing websites. And lastly, they're talking about the AI models that we briefly discussed earlier, and be able to use AI Builder to generate insight on that information. Okay, so without further ado, I've got the wrong screen up. I've just got Joe's big face now. Where's it gone? Oh, that's the wrong screen again. My environment gone. There it is. So going to make.powerapps.com, this is the environment that we've been using. I'm just going to change it to the right one to make sure that we've got the right one. And in the left-hand side, we've got the idea of apps, and you can see if I've already added the portal because that takes a while to run up, and we can go into that a bit later. But all I'm going to do is create a new app. And at this point, I get 3 options: Canvas, model driven and portal. So let's step through the first one with Canvas. And you can see, right, yeah, I don't care, whatever. You can see here we start looking at what our data is. So we've got the option either to connect straight away to data and define it from there, or we can start with a blank application. So for instance, if we were going against our common data service, let's just go into phone layout and create that one here. So common data service is the old term for the Dataverse. And you can see that because we're connected to our environment, this faults table that we created earlier is available. You can go to any of these tables, but the one that I'm going to use in our scenario is faults, and we do connect. So straight away, what that's done is going to create a connection to my application and generate for me 3 screens. We have got a browse screen, we've got a detail screen, and then we've got an edit screen. So, and if I just saved and published this and then opened it on my mobile phone, I've suddenly got an app that I can use without anything, me doing very little apart from a few clicks. And that's the power of this Canvas apps. And these are fully editable and customizable, but it also gives you a very quick interface from deploying a Canvas app. If you want to quickly gather information, you can really easily do it. But we can connect to more data. So on this left-hand side, we've got more data. We've got all the tables that are within our common data service environment, but we've also got other connectors. So I can connect straight away to my Office 365 users and SharePoint, but I can go and look at all connectors. So I can go and get my data from Basecamp, for example. If we've got a connection there, I can go and get it straight away. And that is the only with the out-of-the-box connections that Microsoft provides. On top of that, you could do those custom connectors that we talked about earlier to really expand your capabilities and leave that data where it should be in that base application. So on this left-hand side as well, I'll just get my notes. We can look at it. We've got different screens here, like we were saying. So on this browse screen, we've got what is called a grid view. We can insert a different one if we didn't like this one. Let's get rid of that one and create a new one. Insert a new gallery, and we've got different options here depending on what you want to see. And these are great for using, lists of data, vertical, horizontal, or etc. that we need to do. So let's put that one back in. And then we can link it to our data set. We're going to link it to faults again, and then it's just taking a few key fields, but we can do more than that. We can edit the fields up here. This is the properties panel over on the right, behind my dog while she barks at the postman. And I can choose which fields are connected to the tables, and I can also drag in, if I wanted to, a new label. Let me just add a new label. And at this point, I can connect to a different field. So that description field that we added straight away, it's taken and it's putting that in as well. And this is all within the confines of this little panel. So if I had more records, it would list them in individual items along this list. So that's a gallery. And you've got different ways of looking at that gallery depending on what your user case is. So lists of records, we would use gallery. On this, we've also got forms. So these detail screens, these are forms, and again we can add fields. We can add extra fields here to show you that description field that we had, and we can basically add as we go along those fields. And I need to change this formula because I broke it earlier. So the idea is that forms give you the view and the editing of data. So this is a view form, but there's also, because it's on that detail screen, there's also an edit screen where I can actually quickly and easy input the information and create a record or update a record. So this is all very easy and very quick and easy to generate and to create. So we're getting to a point now where we can tweak it and play with it. So that's forms, but we're not limited to just relying on the out-of-the-box configuration or the out-of-the-box formatting. If we don't like the layout and we want to be more specific and very anal about the location and the branding, etc., we can choose and do our own versions of these input controls. So we've got a whole list of input controls that we can do. We can have a drop down, which allows us to do a selection list. We've got several parts of this that will allow us to define what options are available. We've got other input controls, even making use of the functionality of a mobile phone, like a pen input. So you could use a pen input to select and enter data and scroll a signature, etc. So using those capabilities of the application. There's another ones here for under the media. We can use the camera to scan barcodes or use the microphone and audio of the phone or the device. So you can see that they're building these applications around the use case, and the use case is for either on a mobile phone on the application, or a mobile phone on the web browser, or even desktop. So depending on which way round you have this, you can start creating a desktop app if you want people to be working in the office doing it. And anything in between, really, it is very much up to you. We briefly looked at formulas earlier, and well, we didn't. The idea is that we can quite easily define properties and formulas. So on the right hand side, we've got the properties window, which has most of the properties available to you, and it's available in a more clickable interface. But it doesn't stop you defining this value, because you'll see all of these options here are listed in this drop down for your formula bar. So we can really start to get into nitty gritty about what the values are. So let me just do that with a simple label. Let's add a label in, and this label here, I want the text to be not just text, but so Saturday. Or let me just do something like user, which is the local user's name, and I can then put in full name. So when that renders, and I need a space in there obviously because I've missed it. When that renders, you can see that it's working it out on the fly, and it's demonstrating that, and it shows that you can use formulas to create content, and you can use formulas to action things as well. So this little icon here has got an on select, which is an action for that button. So when people click it, it fires this event, and we can do more than that. We can then go and do navigate, for example. So we want to select parent, and we want to we put a colon at the end, and then we want to navigate, and this will be taking me to a different screen. So we want to go to the detail screen at that point. So those two actions will happen. If I just hit play now, it won't be working because I broke it, but anyway, I get this little hover because it knows it's got a select event on it, and if I hit play, we go to that false detail screen. I did break it earlier, but it allows you to quickly play with the application. And this hint, it shows you the first time, so get rid of it, but it is showing you a good message, is that if you use the Alt key, you can basically work in the application as if you were playing the application. So it allows you to quickly go in and try something out that you've done. So properties on the right hand side, advanced gives you the full understanding of what those properties are, but that is also repeated up here on the left hand side. So you can, whichever way you want to work, and you need to be aware, not for the PL-900, but as you go through, there's an awful lot of properties that you would want to be aware of and use to customize your application as much as possible. There's a few other things here as well that you should be aware of and can understand. We can quickly and easily change the theme to our environments. If you're happy with the themes that they make available to you. You can be as complicated in these themes as you want to, and there are some tools around creating your own themes, but it doesn't stop you branding this to your own particular needs as well. So the idea of generating your own standard set of controls is a thing as well, which is either via which allows you to do that branding within an organization. So there's not only a color branding, but with a functionality branding and sharing components between different developers or business analysts or whoever is creating these applications to allow you to expand that functionality. If we go into the insert menu, for example, we have a list of custom controls here. So either I can create a new component here, which will take me to a new screen for allow me to create a component that may have certain properties and combine things to give me something that I can reuse, or I can import a component which allows me to bring in somebody else's work and add it to my application. So it allows you to build up a library, and we'll show you that in a second, of components that I can drag and drop into this and configure to get you that reusability and to prevent people reinventing the wheel each time. We talked about AI Builder earlier, but here is where we can start looking at the different AI Builder tools, the out-of-the-box ones that are available to you. You can call your own tools as well if you've configured your own via the connectors. And even more so because of really utilizing the mobile experience, you can start looking this in mixed reality. So if you've got your product and you've got a 3D rendering of that product, you can use that and overlay that into somebody else's workspace. So you really utilize these applications to imagine how your store would look with that new bit of kit in there. So it's bringing all these tools into a non-developer's hands and into everybody's capability to do, and it's very, very powerful. There's a lot more along this top bar so that I can insert. We can put in a Power BI tool which links back into what Joe was talking to us earlier, but we're very much looking at the data that's available to us and making sure that these applications can easily and quickly be into people's hands. Right, so I'm done now. I've done my little screen. I know it's not very complicated and complex, but obviously you can create more and more complexity and navigate between screens here and maybe have a menu system and build up your functionality as you go. But once you're happy with it, you need to save it, give it a nice pretty icon, and save away. And more importantly, you need to publish it. So once you do the first share, you're publishing that version. But if we do, I didn't want to do that, sorry. We then need to be able to publish a version and send it out to people for testing, or maybe we're working in production, which we never should, but the idea of then starting to use that application in its where it's meant to be. And then we can share that app with an individual, or we can share it with everyone. But do remember that they do also need permission on the underlying data source. So it's no good creating an app that connects off to Salesforce if they haven't got the permissions to get those applications. The other side to that is that every time you save, you're updating a version, but only the published version is only the ones that get into the production environment. So everyone will be able to see the current version until you publish a new version, which allows you to do a little bit of lifecycle management to ensure that you've got everything fixed before you publish that new version. Okay, so that is a very quick overview of Canvas apps. Bear in mind that I would certainly start from a application and make sure that you've at least gone through the steps of creating your first Canvas app and understand these things that are going on, to get an idea of what's happening in these scenarios. We're not asking for a lot of detail in PL-900, but it is certainly essential that you understand the data sources and how to get those things in there. There's an awful lot. There's in this Canvas apps on the Learn websites, and plenty of YouTube videos, but depending on which way you're going to go. Okay, the next. Oh, okay. Sorry, what I did miss. We did talk about components earlier, but in the Power Apps Studio, there is this components libraries, which is allowing you to create a component and share it with others, but not starting on an application. So you can start building up those component libraries, which allows you to be more complex and more thoughtful on your branding and how your things are positioned. On top of all of that is the Power Apps component framework, set of applications where you can build using HTML and TypeScript and CSS, all those great things, tied back to and create your own components that are even more complex than ones that Microsoft provide us, and allow ISVs and all those people to create those own versions and maybe do something really snazzy. And there is websites, I can't remember the website name, but they have a host of these controls that you can bring in. That's certainly for another day and more into a developer exam, but just for the PL-900, you need to know about them. And what I'm trying to get to here is that we've got the default components that Microsoft give us down at this bottom level, which are simple to use, that they're free, apart from your license fee, obviously. And then you get into custom components where you get a bit more complexity, you get combining things and taking away some of that, expanding on the logic that they're provided. And then you've got this more expensive, as in you need a developer, and what can be very complex Power Apps component framework, which is where most of the if you need a custom thing to do something that's very, very bespoke to you, that's where you need to go, and just expands that capability from just using standard components to opening up the whole world to you. Okay, we've done all of that, I think. Yeah. And so this is just highlighting the idea that when you share, you can share to users or groups, but you've got to consider the permissions. So make sure that they've got access to the Dataverses if that's what you're using, but also any of the other connectors you're using, they've got to have access to that as well. Okay, next is Power Apps portals. So these are external facing websites, and what I mean by that is a website that anyone can get to, wherever you are in the world. You don't need to have Power Apps installed on your phone. You don't have to be an end user of your organization. You can be someone, you know, the standard scenario is back to that fault. I want to log a fault with my freezer. I want to log on to the website, log a fault, and someone will get back to me and plan when they're going to fix it. Or I want to look at my bill, or I want to look at my account history, all those sort of things that people use. And there's plenty of portals around for various incarnations of that. But what Power Apps portals allows us to do is to quickly and easily create a portal for those user cases that are directly linked back to our Dataverse environment. And I'll just quickly run through how to do that within Power Apps. We saw earlier it's down here under portal. Now it does take a while. So when I created this environment, I started that process, and I'm not sure whether it's ready yet. Let me just go and have a look. It was giving me an error message earlier. Yeah, it's not quite ready yet, but you can see it's quite an easy thing to do. Leave that one. Where's my app gone? So all you would do is create a new portal. You give it a name, you give it an ID. I can't create any more because I already got one, but this is where that URL, you can create a URL of your own, and you set a language. If I go into my one that I created an hour ago, and do browse, you can see that I've now got a publicly facing website with all these things that are available to me, and it's showing me a few of the key features. But I can then go and edit that and quite easily and quickly add new pages, or select from a template, etc., to generate content for this externally facing website. And it's not only just it can be both externally facing, as in you're not logged in, but you may put behind certain actions, you need to be logged in, so we can need to authenticate you. So the idea is that you're either authenticated directly within the Power Platform, the Dataverse environment, so you've got a user record and a username and password stored against your contact record, or we use something like Azure Active Directory or Facebook or one of the other authentication providers to do that login for us. So we know who it is, and we can present them with data that's specific to them. So I showed you here, we can do a new page. We can then do look at the pages that are already available, and we can quite easily do changes here, and be specific about the font size. We can be more, and is a very much what you see is what you get variation of this content. We can change the font color, we can do the alignment, etc. And it's a very simple and easily click and connect way of doing these things. If we want to get more in depth, we can look at the HTML code and get into more developer side of these things, and really see what's going on with these things, and be more specific and more stylized. Or we can just rely on being able to add components. So maybe I want to add within this section a new image. So then it's added this image. I can then select an image from whatever I've got available to me, and I can change the formatting to make sure it's only like 10% because it's massive, and that sort of thing. So that we're getting into very much click and configure part of the Power Apps portal. There is also other components that we've got down here, forms, so we can ask for data, we can enter data, we can display data. We can display data from records that we've got against Dataverse. We can list records again against Dataverse, and you can see that we can do Power BI. So all of those things that are available to you, as in a clickable, easy interface to do that. We've also got the idea of some basic theming. We can either edit the CSS, which means you're getting into the nitty-gritty about the style sheets and the theming that are available to you, but you get you very much into your own brand, and a lot of brands will have these CSS files ready to go and using standard properties for titles, etc. Or you can enable the basic theme and say that I like this dark yellow, this product Power BI look and feel. So again, it's applying that logic straight and easily to you, or you can go in between, and there's nothing stopping you there. Right, so but once I've saved it and I've synced the configuration, hopefully when I browse the website, it's now that yellow colors that I've chosen. And you can see that this is a public facing website. I've not signed in, so this is available to everyone. If you went to that URL now, you'll be able to get there too. Once I sign in, it's asking me for a username and password. and we can go from there. And maybe we've got some more information on the back of that. Now, if you, I'm just going to go back to if you go back to your apps here and go to the right environment, Power Apps Portals comes with a portal management app, a model-driven portal management app. And this is because all this information that you're doing to generate this is actually data in tables, rows in tables, to do with the different configurations. If you go to that app in here and press play, you will then start to edit that data about your website. So the history of Power Apps Portals, it was bought from an independent solution provider, and it's evolved to what we've got today. But effectively, we've got this model-driven app, which we'll create in a second, basically defining all our page templates, all our brandings and bindings and site settings. All these things are just data within that database, that Dataverse environment. So this particular area is where you get into the more nitty-gritty about how to display your information. It takes you away from that click and configure information into a full-blown suite of available to you. For instance, you've got content snippets, which allows you to do change properties on a page without going into the detail. It will just be these little snippets that allows you to get into this information. There's the email header, for example. The footer and header of websites is defined here, so it's repeated on all these websites. But these are all your content snippets. We get into web pages, and we get into that same web page we were looking at earlier, and the localized content, because you can have localized versions of the application. And you can see this is the not very WYSIWYG, but it is what we were looking at earlier. This is that broken image that it doesn't look like it's worked properly. But this is what we were looking at earlier. It doesn't look as pretty. It doesn't give you the same look and feel. It's not quite point and click, but it gives you more complexity and more customization functionality in it. One of the key ones here is your website links, which is your navigation. So we can then establish the pages that appear across the portal, etc., and define those within that website links. So it allows you really to customize where you're going with this website. And that's the old one, isn't it? Because that's not the one I need you to there it is. But it's the same here. This will show you exactly where you're going and link pages together. Right. Okay. So the third type of application, and we are really running through this. Let me get back to Power Apps, is a model-driven app. And a model-driven app is effectively starting from your data, and rather than being starting from the interface, which is what Canvas apps, you've got a blank canvas, that's where that term comes from. Again, we just want to create a new model-driven app. We can start to use it from an existing solution, and we can try and have a welcome page, etc., and do a few tweaks, but we're good to go. And what model-driven app is trying to do is trying to formulate a business application and restrict the information that's displayed to a user that they actually care about. So don't show them everything that's available within Dataverse. Just show them the tables that they should be dealing with. They should be dealing with contacts and accounts. They should be dealing with opportunities, but they don't care about cases. For example, if you're looking for a sales focused application. So what we need to do here is a few things. We need to define a sitemap, which defines what is shown to them when they open the application. and then we need to define the restrictions on the tables and which views and which forms that we need to do. So let's first of all go into the sitemap and do edit. And this is the default, so we can change this to the different groups, and I'll show you how this looks in a second. But in this new sub area, which is what we want to add in, we want to select an entity. Again, you're looking at the old terminology. I just want to look at contacts, and I want to add a new sub area there, and I also want to look at fault. And maybe we just want that third one in there. Let's just put in accounts as well. Did I call it customer? Company, I called it. Note to self, you have to remember what you're calling it. You have got other options here. You can have dashboards, you can have web resources, which are web pages, or you can go link to a URL, so you can fire them off to news.bbc or wherever you want to go at that point. But for the 900 exam, you just need to know that this is what you need to do. So in this, also you've got privileges. You can basically restrict the visibility of this depending on whether they've got access to the table, etc. If I just do save and close now, you can now, because I chose those 3 tables here, they've been brought in. But you can also see that under that company table, for example, at the moment I can see all the forms that are available to me in the Dataverse environment. These are all the out-of-the-box versions of the account form. But if I just want to show one form and not given the option to choose the rest of them, I can do that here. So I'm now tweaking the application. I'm also can do the same with views. So if I just want all accounts and my accounts, then I can restrict that here. Same applies for dashboards and charts. Same applies for business processes. If I don't do that, because I'll show you the difference between that when we're ready, to contacts and fault, it will just bring everything in and give you access to everything. I can also restrict the dashboards that get shown across the board here as well. There is also business process flows. So business process flows are a way of stepping you through a process and are used heavily within model-driven apps to, the case may have to go through some sort of configuration and then go step through these processes. So we can restrict that there as well. So I'm just going to do save and do publish. And I'll hit play. And well, that's so you now got this nice little contacts group that I created within my site app. I've got all the views that are available to me because I didn't restrict it, but I can then go and create, this is my contact that I created, so I can go and create a new contact. I can choose a different form if I need to. That is where I'm not restricted, and go and create that contact. And the same would apply with companies, but because I restricted it, I've only got those 2 views, and I've only got 1 form as well. I can't change the form here, so I'm now restricting that application view, and that this left-hand side is very minimal and really restricts my user to stuff that they care about. If I go into views within the back into the model-driven app, I can actually tweak these views from this interface. So I can go to all accounts. I can then add a new column from the primary entity, and I say, well, I'm interested in the address 1 field. Come on, drag in, there you go. And then I can change the width if I wanted to, and do save on that as well. So I've now changed that view, so I can edit it here. I can publish that and close. It always give it a kick. And I can also do say with the forms, if my account form, I want to edit that. We're now into that model-driven app editor of application of the form. So we've now got this default form that we're using, but we can add new fields to this form. We can add new fields to the entity and maybe show that. We can add fields from the table that we've got, the columns that are from the table. Say we're interested in the city in here, and I can stick that in there. And then suddenly we've got this ability to formalize data. This model-driven form is very much data-oriented, but it's using the legacy, the Dynamics 365 application. So you've got this activities timeline in the center, which allows you to associate emails and meetings and notes and attachments into. You've also got the standard controls for secondary grids and everything else that's going in and around that. So it's a very much a data focused environment, but as you can see, we can quickly and easily add fields, we can drag and drop them, but we're more structured, and that's the point here, that we're more structured than the Canvas app. We can't have that complexity. We can't connect directly to a different data source. We're stuck in the Dataverse world. We can do a lot more to this model-driven app, and it's probably out of scope for our PL-900 discussion, but you can have secondary grids, you can have child accounts, etc. Is here as a secondary grid, so you can add them as you go along, and you have this tabbed interface as well to show you that. We talked briefly about owner on tables as well here, so that you can see that we've now got an owner against a record. Right, we're probably overrunning like normal. We briefly talked about portals, but the idea of portals and security, I'm jumping around here because I missed it. I apologize for that. But the idea is that a logged in user or a page can be restricted to a logged in user, or it may be to a certain security group. So there is, once we're into that model-driven configuration of a Power Platform, Power Apps portal, we can define where that security lies. Let me show. We talked about authentication. We can set up configuration to authenticate not only against Azure Active Directory, but some other person's Active Directory. So if we've got a business to customer environment, we can configure it to use their environment, or one of the other common ones, Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. And then we can share this portal with other people, internal or external users. And we can then move to model-driven apps. Here is a great picture of a model-driven app that people are creating, where we've got this dashboard with charts on it that's been created for you. We can use a Power BI chart at this point as well, to really define your business requirements and understanding of that model-driven application. Briefly go over what we've shown. The model-driven apps are built on that data that we've already established, those tables and columns and relationships. It's got that application interface to restrict what tables and views, etc., are shown. But we've also got that business process flows that we looked at. We've got workflows, which is the older version of Power Automate, which is really getting into the nitty-gritty of we probably don't use it anymore. We've got actions that we can take on that data, and we can generate those business rules, and then we can use Power Automate, which Joe's about to go into. The visualizations we looked at briefly with the charts and the dashboards, but we can expand that to embed with Power BI. So model-driven apps really are for desktop users typically, but can be expanded to be used on a mobile phone, etc. I don't know what you want to do now, Joe, because we should have a break for the next section. We've got an hour left.
I don't know, unless anyone's got anything in the chat, sort of strong views either way. I mean, I'm just happy just to power on through, I guess. No pun intended, given we're moving on to Power Automate, of course.
No strong views. Crack on.
Let's crack on. Why the hell not?
Lessons learned that we don't do this in 4 hours. We need more than that.
Yeah, well, I think it's, I don't know. I think if you do this as an official course, I think it's about 1 or 2 days. I think so. Yeah, but no, there is a lot to consume. So I think the key takeaway is don't be overwhelmed ultimately by what we're discussing today, because you're not expected to go really deep into the detail for this exam at all. So, right, it would help if I share screens, wouldn't it? So give me a moment. Power BI row levels. Let me just read that out properly for the recording. I can answer that one. Yeah, so Imad's asking, how do you use Power BI row level security in Power Apps portal? So effectively, when you configure row level security at the Power BI level, when you then bring it across into the Power Apps portal, I think provided that the report is being authenticated with the same user that's logged into the portal, i.e. it's using the Microsoft 365 login, then it should enforce that. For any other scenario, then I believe it won't work at all, because it needs the logged in users details to be able to enforce that. Oh, sorry, Paul. Sorry, you're overwhelmed. Right. Let me share my screen. Let me know that's come through, Carl.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good stuff. So let's take a look now at Power Automate in a bit more detail and what the capabilities you've got on offer there. So for the purposes of the exam, actually, no, it helps if I'm at the right slide, doesn't it? There we go. So for the purposes of the exam, what you need to know is you need to be able to identify common components. So similar to what we spoke about with Power BI, it's all about describing at a high level what the various different functionality points are. And some of these we have touched upon already. You need to understand how to build a basic flow, understand the options that you've got there, how you can then interact and work with that flow, run it, and also then modify it after the fact. And that's pretty much it, really. So this one's not too bad in terms of understanding. So let's just dive in and just see if we can understand this in a bit more detail. So we've touched upon this already in terms of the value, but it's worth just re-emphasizing in terms of what situations we can use or leverage Power Automate. So, it's really for those situations where we've got those really boring, repetitive tasks that we just want to, really sort of not have to worry about too much. If we're in situations where maybe we want to guide users through specific processes, then they're a good candidate as well. If we've got that external integration point, then again, that's another great candidate. And as we touched upon as well, if we've got these desktop-based processes that we can easily record and then get a bot to play through, then again, Power Automate will sort of solve this as well. As a common scenario as well, it's integration across the different aspects of the Power Platform is another that you can bring into the equation. So we can see in this example flow on here, based on a trigger from a Power Apps, a Canvas Power App that we've created, we can then feed through values to then basically get the manager of a particular user, and then we can kick off an approval flow based on that. So hopefully that gives you some ideas in terms of how you can leverage Power Automate. In terms of how you can do it in a sort of efficient way, there's a couple of options that you've got available to you to help you with that. Microsoft make available various different pre-built templates that you can just sort of take off the shelf, give it a quick dust off and start using. So these will cover common scenarios and common automations that maybe Microsoft have identified, or indeed other users of the platform have submitted and Microsoft have basically made available as well. From a connector standpoint, then we've got a dizzying array of different connectors, over 300 plus. I think that's even higher now in terms of connectors available that you can use to connect to different apps and services. So, you can be reasonably satisfied that in most situations, you're going to find a connector off the shelf to be able to do that. And, the worst case scenario from there is that you will need to get a developer involved just to basically build out a connector. But hopefully that covers 5% of the scenarios as opposed to 95 or indeed all of them. Integration is a key thing, so it's going to be reasonably well with the broader Microsoft ecosystem. and indeed other third-party vendors as well. And you've got the ability of having that on-premise integration. So what you can do in a nutshell is install a gateway onto your local network. From there, you can then interact with your local databases, your local files and things as if they were available in the cloud. Effectively, it just creates a secure tunnel between the Power Platform and your local environment. So that really opens up quite a lot of integration scenarios. And for organizations maybe who are still lagging behind in terms of their cloud adoption or cloud migration, then it provides a really nice and easy shortcut for you to get into to get working with the Power Platform straight away. So touched upon this already in terms of an approval flow, but as a broad example, which we discussed already, user can start the process, they go into their app, create the request, that then kicks off the flow. We can then query the Microsoft 365 or the Graph API to get details about that user's manager just by giving the email address of the user. And then we can then trigger off an approval flow that then gets sent out as an email or indeed gets received through the Power Automate app, either on the cloud or the desktop, that the user can then just press a button on or can provide further details on, sort of approve it. So really just streamlining what could be otherwise a very complex approval process. So effectively, to continue this flow onwards, so it lands with the manager, they then get the approval through. We can then evaluate the result of that particular approval. And then based on that, we can then kick off additional logic. So, okay, if they've not approved it, then we can just email a rejection back to the user to basically sort of say, okay, well, can you fix these issues on it, please? Or, we could have additional sub logic over that. So, maybe our manager, is, needs to sort of get even more senior approval when the purchase is over a certain value. So that being the case, we can then sort of kick off a second approval flow that goes to our vice president or our, senior director in our business to then sort of approve that for us. And all being well, but at the back end of it, the user may get an approval an email back saying that everything's been approved and we're all hunky-dory, start spending. So, potentially, as I say, a scenario which otherwise might be very difficult to map out, Power Automate gives us that capability to do that, and through a few different steps, which is really nice. So we've got three types of flows that sit within Power Automate. We've got our event-driven flows, so those are the ones that we've touched upon already that have a trigger action that run on a schedule. Those are the ones that will typically fit into that category. You may also hear them referred to as cloud flows as a sort of from a terminology standpoint. Business process flows, which Carl has touched upon already, they are a type of flow. They are categorized as a flow, and you can use them as part of your model-driven apps. And again, those are the situations where you need to, where you've got a very well-defined business process that you want to be able to sort of mirror out into the application. And then finally, the desktop flows, again, we've touched upon this already, but these are our RPA, our robotic process automation flows that we can record on the desktop and then sort of run in attended or unattended mode. And the great thing is that, because we've got the AI builder capability sitting underneath the hood, then we can bring these into Power Automate really straightforwardly. So whether we want to do sort of some form processing as an action step, so take text from an image from our invoice, save that back into Dataverse. Whether we want to do object detection, so maybe we want to detect whether a particular picture is a sort of a unicorn or not a unicorn. You can sort of do that, and the AI will sort of build that and detect that up. Prediction, so it's all about building sort of prediction models around maybe your record quality, maybe lead scoring and things like that. And then finally, text classification. So a good scenario for this could be maybe you're receiving customer feedback back. Obviously you have the typical model where people give a score based on the service and then maybe give some notes at the end of it. That might not always tell the full story about what's going on, so maybe you want to run a text classification around what the customer's actually typed in, and if they're using particularly strong language, either in a positive or negative sense, then you can maybe tag that and flag that for attention. And obviously, if the customer is really quite upset, then you can then route that particular CSAT or particular complaint through to the appropriate organisation or the appropriate person in the organisation, I should say. So these are the AI models that you can very easily start using with Power Automate flows. As I mentioned already, you can create flows from a template. There's lots of different templates available, so you can basically have one, as we can see on there. So you send yourself a reminder in 10 minutes about something. Record form responses from SharePoint. Lots of different flows and examples on there. All you need to do is just select one, put in the appropriate connection details for the service that you're working with, and then it should all go off, and you can start working with it. So a couple of important concepts to keep in mind. So again, with some of these we touched upon already. So make sure you're aware of the differences between triggers and actions. So triggers, again, are those things that kick off the flow, either in terms of an action from an external system or a schedule, as an example. Actions are the bits within the flow that does stuff, the bits that do stuff. Yeah, let's go with that one. So you can have one or more actions within your particular flow. Could be as complex as you like in that regard. But ultimately, your flow can only have one trigger that kicks it off. Okay, and it's a starting action for that. And then the actions will typically cover things such as create a record in a system or do things like that. But you've got other actions as well, which aren't tied to a particular service. So as an example, you've got the ability of being able to do loops. So loop through until a condition is met, a set of actions until a condition is met. You can implement your sort of, other common programming constructs such as switch statements. So do a specific set of actions based on whether a value equals this. Do until, again, loop through and just do that. Apply to each. So let's say you've returned 10 records from Microsoft Dataverse. You want to do a specific action against each of those. And then finally, you've got a very powerful expression-based language that sits underneath this that you can use to make your flows even more dynamic. The expression language is based off something called the Workflow Definition Language, or WDL. And you've got common functions available there to be able to do things such as concatenate, convert to different data into different objects. All sorts of really good stuff on there. Again, and don't worry too much about literally knowing detailed WDL functions for the exam. Again, just concern yourself with the high level concepts and things like that. So we've got a question from Pranav in the chat. Is Power Automate for automation? Yes, it's designed as an automation tool. So being able to, as Carl says, automate your workflows, just make things easier, save yourself from doing tedious things day in, day out. Yeah, so triggers, we touched upon already a few different types. The first two we've focused on, so I'm not going to really concern ourselves too much at this point. So when an action, something changes on a schedule. A final option is that the ability of being able to schedule based on a button press. So this is will allow you effectively to trigger the flow in a few different ways. So you can actually go in through the Power Automate portal and press the button that way to trigger the flow. You can do it within your mobile application to do it. You've even got the ability of being able to integrate with a third-party service, which is called Flick. And other services as well. So basically, if somebody presses a button, that will then kick off the flow. So you could maybe have it so that you've got a button maybe for your when we're back to normal, when people get into the office, they press a button maybe when they check in or something like that, and then boom, that kicks off a flow, and then maybe tells the building manager perhaps that maybe we've got somebody new who's coming to the building. Maybe we need to review our social distancing measures because there's still a risk of COVID or things like that. There's a few options on there. With the button press option as well, and this will be more for when you're working with a mobile app or when you're working with desktop to trigger it, but you can also specify certain parameters that go in as well. So you can, as well as pressing the button, I can supply, let's say, maybe a yes or a no. I can put some text in, I can give a date or a number, and then again, when the flow is executing, I can read those values and I can customize that based on specific sort of requirements that I need to have. So button press is quite a good option potentially, and useful for quite a few different scenarios. So when we're scheduling our flows, we've got some really quite extensive options for how we can run it. So we can literally have it run on specific days of the week. We could have one running every minute of every hour of every day if we wanted to. But you'll probably get your administrator or the person who pays for your licensing probably get a little bit annoyed over time at that. You can just run it on a specific date. So in the future, so maybe you've got some batch process that you just want to run for one time. As I say, quite a few different options on there, and we can see through this experience, we can just sort of define the options, and then we get a human readable description of when it's going to run there. So we can just, so again, just making sure that it's doing what we think it's going to do. Button flows. So yeah, again, not really much more to mention around this. Again, this is an example of how the Power Automate app looks and how the approvals will sort of look as you come through. So not really much else to comment on that. And then in the portal is where you then go to basically manage and sort of see the approvals that you received and also the ones that have been sent out as well. From there, you can also export the flow if you wanted to. So again, touched upon this already, but business process flows, again, it's got these defined steps that you want people to sort of go through when you're working with model-driven apps or data on top of the Dataverse. That's the key bit, ultimately. Business process flows are very, very much bound towards Dataverse and model-driven apps. So you won't necessarily be able to use them with your external data sources as part of that. So just keep that in mind with your business process flows. Okay, so at this point then, let's do a quick demo and just see what Power Automate flows are all about. So I'm just going to come out of that. And I'm in the Maker portal. I'm in a solution. Again, here's one I made earlier that we can use to sort of extend out further. We can see I've got a couple of cloud flows in here already that we'll sort of go through and have a quick look at. But let's just create one from scratch on here. So I'm just going to go to Cloud Flow, click on New Cloud Flow. It's going to take me into the Power Automate portal. I'm working in the context of my solution on here because I'm trying to follow best practice approaches. I want to potentially move this out to other environments. This is how we sort of do it. And effectively, when we create a flow for the first time, we get a screen that's similar onto here where we basically are asked to provide our trigger action for our particular flow. So in this case, we're just going to do a manually triggered flow. We can see that we've got some additional options that we can sort of provide at this particular point. So maybe we can sort of do something like, okay, email input. We can maybe put some details into there, enter an email address or something like that. A few different data options on there. We're not going to worry too much about doing that for today. And then on the new step, we can see some of the various options that come out on there. We've got a search bar at the top up here that we can use. So if I was maybe interested in connecting to Salesforce, I can maybe type that in there and then bam, I get all of my particular actions that I can use with that. You'll see that certain actions are basically flagged as premium, as premium connectors. Premium connectors will typically almost always require you to have a license assigned, a paid license assigned or a capacity license assigned to be able to use them. So we can see in the case of the Common Data Service current environment one, that is a premium license. SharePoint is not a premium connector, as we can sort of see down there. So again, just keep that in mind that there may be certain licensing constraints based on the connector type that you're working with. We can see in terms of the action steps that we've got available, we've got ones that connect to service. We can see we've got a condition-based one up here, so we can actually set up a conditional flow based on that, add in our appropriate action steps. We've got other ones as well, so we can do things such as, let's say, maybe terminate, so we can maybe end our flow prematurely. We can click on control on here to see all the different options. So we've got switches, we can have a do until and apply to each. Scope is quite useful in the sense of if you've got a set of actions that maybe are interrelated, so all need to succeed or all need to sort of fail sort of in tandem, then you can use scope to basically control that, and then based on whether certain action steps sort of complete or not, we've got the ability of being able to determine whether the next action sort of succeeds or fails. So I'm just going to show you a quick example of that. So if I just choose, I'm just going to add on any odd step on here. So I'm just going to list out all my accounts. I'm going to add on an additional step down here where maybe I want to send out an email as an example. what we can do is we can go back onto here, or go back onto here more specifically. We can actually do configure run after, and we can set so that, okay, we only want to send an email if the previous step has sort of failed. And what we can see then, the line there goes red to sort of just make it clear in terms of you know, this is what's going to happen when it fails. Or alternatively, we can add on a parallel branch, which maybe, I don't know, does something different. Maybe we just want to list some more rows if we get the first set of rows through. So again, I'm just going to select any old anything in there as an example, and it seems to be doing something funky. Let's give it another go. There we go. So again, we just then need to just make sure that we've got our configure run after configured, so it's cleared it for that one. So I'm just going to do is failed on that one, and then for this one on here, we're going to do configure run after if it's successful only. So again, we can make sure we've got, you know, we're handling our errors effectively using Power Automate Flow and using configure run after. We've got those capabilities baked in, which is really nice. But for now, let's just show you an example of a approval flow and how that sort of works. So I'm just going to I'm just going to do start and wait for approvals first of all. I'll do approval reject first to response as our approval type. I'll just do this our PL-900 approval. And for the purpose of this, I'm just going to assign this approval to me. Yep, so it's found my user account on there. There won't be some additional details down there. There's additional things that you can add on to be able to do it, but for the purpose of this, I'm just going to save the flow. I want to make sure that I'm giving it a name, so approval test at the top. Hit save on that one. Just give that a second. Okay. Run this approval flow to. Okay, it's not been installed, so just give me a warning that I just need to run it for the first time. So effectively, when the flow's been created and is ready to go, I can then test the flow at any point just by hitting the button up there, and I can just perform a manual test of it by clicking save and test. So I'm just going to click on continue, run the flow. And then that's probably just going to take a minute while it's installing it in the background. So for now, we'll just let that run, and then we'll come back to this in a few minutes. But let's just take a look at some other example flows that we can sort of build out that are very much tied towards the Microsoft Dataverse. So this one on here, this is for sort of a campus sort of security sweep system. So what this flow does is that it basically just runs every 15 minutes. We go off to query Microsoft Dataverse. We've got a table that we built out there called visits that records when people come onto the campus. And then what we do is we filter out the results of that to basically return all active visits where people haven't actually left yet within the, or where the scheduled end is greater than 15 minutes away. Okay. So we've got some additional options on here that we can maybe leverage as well. So we can maybe sort our data, we can return a row count, things like that. But effectively on here, we're just returning a filtered list of our visit data from Dataverse. Then what we can do based on the results that we get back, all of the records, we then get the details about the building and the visitor, in this case, the contact that this relates to. And then we can send out an email notification to them and basically just informing us that, okay, yeah, so-and-so has overstayed their welcome. So maybe we need to go off and investigate that. So again, a pretty straightforward flow on there, but potentially quite powerful in terms of the functionality we're doing on that. Let's take a look at this other one on here, visit notification. So this one is based off a trigger point within the Dataverse. So when a new visit is created, we then get the details about that newly created record, and we want to send an email out to them just to confirm that they are scheduled in to visit our campus at this start date and this end date. and we also give them a security code as well that they can use on site. So we can make the whole email dynamic, you know, both in terms of the contents of the email itself, but also the person we're sending it to. So that's really quite powerful there. Right, let's have a look at this on here. Right, it's still running. Whilst we're waiting, and I'm just conscious of time as well. It's worth familiarizing yourself with the flow sort of setting page that we can see on here. So every flow will have this on here. It gives you a bit of a summary in terms of, okay, what the flow is, who created it, when it was last modified, what connections is it using. So in this case, this flow here is using the Common Data Service and mail connectors. A good thing is that we've got the ability of being able to view the full history of the particular flow. So you can see that I've last ran this yesterday evening. I can go in and as a flow designer, and I can actually see what actually happened at each specific action step. So, you know, from a debugging standpoint and from a you know, from a just, you know, checking just to make sure that things are working correctly, then it will effectively let you sort of do that and work that. So yeah, full history. So the key thing to remember is that yeah, I'm just seeing that now. So I think if it's installed the solution, Carl, I go to approvals up here. This is still installing the solution.
Yeah, you should have done that beforehand, Joe. It takes a little while.
Yeah, it helps if you actually run through the steps that you hope to demo on the day, doesn't it? That would be a really good idea. Anyway,
Approvals, the approval solutions that it's importing into take a little while to get there, and so anyway.
Is what it is. But yeah, effectively, this is the way you would go. So if I did have the approval through, I get the view into here. I can also see approvals that have been sent, and I get a full history as well. So hopefully at some point within the next, maybe before the end, if we're lucky, I'll get that through. We can go from there. So just to finish off our discussion on this screen on here, so we've got options of being able to share the flow out. We can save a copy of it, we can delete, send a copy of it to someone else. We can export it out into a package or into sort of, I used to be able to do it into Logic Apps, but I think they've removed that now. We can view analytics for the flow, so I can click on here and I get a nice little view in terms of, okay, who's actually doing what with this flow? Is it doing what we hope it to do, or, you know, is it being used a bit too much maybe from a usage and from a licensing standpoint? In this case, it's only run once, so we're all good on that one. And then finally, we can also turn off our flows as well. So if we don't want it to run for a particular period, we can just go in and just preemptively just turn it off and then turn it back on again when we're ready to go. Final thing, just to show you quickly, connectors down here will list all of the various different connectors that you can work with Power Automate. In terms of the details about the connections themselves to those services, this will be down here in data connections. So we can see down here, we've got connections on here for the approvals one, 2 for the common data service and 1 for mail down there. And then finally, I can access my various different templates from up here. I can search for all of them. If I find one that I'm particularly interested in, I can just click on it like so. It's going to give me a bit more detail. I then just need to give the connection details that will go off and create that for me. Okay, so just to answer the question that's come off in the chat before I hand back to Carl. So a question from Nikosi, I hope I pronounced that rightly. What is the flow checker used for? So the flow checker is it's used to sort of tell you when there's a potential blocking issue with your flow that could stop it from working as intended. So if we click on this one on here, we can see that I've got no errors and no warnings on this particular one. A few minutes ago, when we had that overflow that wasn't quite for the approvals, wasn't quite working how we wanted to, I think we did get an error on there warning us about the solution not working. Seems to have gone now. But effectively, if there's a breaking issue with your flow, it will show up on here. So that will mean that your flow cannot run at all until you've addressed that. Warnings will be, okay, maybe there's something that you just need to check on it to fix, which may have maybe a performance impact or something like that that you need to look at. Okay, approval's not come through, so that's fine. So Pranav's question, what is an approval? So an approval is where we want somebody to basically just approve or reject something, based on, a common business process. So maybe you want to approve an expense, you want to approve, somebody's time off leave request. There's various different scenarios where that would work. And then final question from Emad before we move on. How do I have central login where I can see all flows and can trigger them again? Also, can we configure a flow to retry a number of times? So you would use probably the solutions or the Power Platform Admin Center to get that bird eye view, Carl, would you say?
Yeah.
And then configuring a flow to retry. I think you can do that based on, I think you would have to have a child flow, would you, Carl? And then you just keep trying that again, use the do until, and then eventually you would just fail it after, let's say, 3 or 4 attempts. A couple of ways you could do it, maybe.
Yeah, you've got looping controls in there, so you can easily do a do until, which would try, but it would be a child flow rather than anything else, depending on what your solution is.
Yeah.
Certainly above and beyond 900, Emad.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. really, it's just how do I create a flow, and also focus specifically on this, on how the approvals work as well. That's really important. So apologies we weren't able to show that today. But no, over to Carl now to finish off with
the final piece of the puzzle. We've done Power BI, Power Apps, Flow, Power Automate, and now is the Power Virtual Agents. So virtual agents are chatbots. They are those little things that pop up when you go on any website nowadays and go, hey, can I help? And it allows you to interact with your users in a natural language scenario where they can ask you questions and you can respond back, and you can go through certain steps to gain more information or answer their question, maybe driving them to a different site, etc. So the idea around a virtual agent is just that. It's a low-code approach to creating these chatbots. Whereas if you're in a proper development world, could be very costly in terms of ensuring that they're working correctly. So without further ado, let's just get into it. We're back in our environment, and unlike Joe, again, virtual agents takes a little while to warm up the first time. So I did go and create one before this. But it would just be in chatbots on this left-hand side. Make sure you're in the right environment and basically create one. And you just create a bot name, etc. So and the language, and make sure you've got the right environment, not the default one. And we go and create. And it gives you this little bitty picture of building a bot. So and you can just see on this left-hand side what we're going to talk about now. So topics being those conversation starters. They're basically saying, what are the key phrases when someone interacts with my bot to trigger this whole thing that we're going to do? And you can have multiple topics per bot. So in our scenario, we are basically going to start building our own bot and working through those things. So if I look at the topics that are available to me, these are all the out of the box ones, and some of these are just to get you starting and discussion, but there's also other ones here that are system ones, which are basically if you go into hello, how are you doing, etc. And these are defined by Microsoft. You can't do anything with these. You can tailor the authoring and what's going to happen, and you can change the message that gets responded to, etc. But these are the standard ones you can't get rid of. So if I do say hello down this left-hand side, we should get a response, and you can see that it's responding to me. And at this point, normally you would ask them a question or do something maybe get them to choose one of the other topics. We just go back to the topic screen now and let's create a topic. So the idea is that this is to do with certification, and we want a bot to guide us through that process and maybe give us some helpful hints along the way. So I'm going to create a new topic. I'm going to give it call it certification. These are all
Carl.
optional. Yeah.
Sorry, Cock, I just interrupt. I've got a question here from Pranav. How do you get the bot to respond the way you want to your question?
This is where I'm going to go through now, Pranav. So these trigger phrases will then give us a response. So as soon as we start these trigger phrases and we've got those in, we will then go further and work out how we're going to respond to the user. But maybe just bear with me a little while. So like I was saying, the trigger phrases are these one-liners about what we expect the user to enter. And what Microsoft does is amalgamates these and ensures that it's taking the key points out of these, so you don't have to write every single variation, but enough variations that it can use its own AI model to help out. So I'm just going to copy and paste from my list here of these certifications. So we've got these trigger phrases. And it's affecting 5 phrases, and you can give it more than one. You don't need to do any 5 at all for your demonstration, but the more you give it, the better it's likely to be able to trigger. And once we're done that, we can then save the topic and save that, and then go to the authoring canvas. And the authoring canvas is basically, once I start with those trigger phrases, and you can see all 5 listed there, what does the bot do? So the user has given us the ability to has asked us this question on what we're going to do, and we've got a few options here. The first one being a message, and any old random thing we can include there, and then we can add to that. So we can ask a question, we can call an action, which is calling over to Power Automate, which we'll go into a little bit later. We can show a message, which is the same as this box here. We can jump to another topic, so we can have series of topics. So one might be about certification, there might be something about what levels have I got, what are my current account details, what is the status of my fault, all those sort of things, and you build it up. You build up these topics for your bot. You have one bot with many topics. So you may want to drive to a different topic, so you can have parent and child topics and keep them separate, and so you can build up that complexity, and also you can end with conversation. And we are talking about reducing the time that our agents are taking speaking to our end users. So the idea is that if you've got this in front on your website and you've given them enough information, they don't have to spend time on the phone waiting for an agent to be available, which reduces it improves the customer experience, maybe reduces the number of agents you need, and all those sort of things. So we're really establishing a different way of users communicating with you and improving their customer satisfaction. And also the bots run 24/7. So we're really getting to a point where we're fielding their question whatever time they want it fielded, rather than relying on opening times. So let's just ask a question. And our questions is going to be, what topic do you want to learn? So we can identify this, and what this is basically meaning is what is the response meant to be? Are we expecting a multiple choice, whether that's like Azure Power Platform in our case, whether we want a user's entire response in exactly what they write, maybe to do with age and or a yes no response, or cities? These are all inbuilt entities. So these are all the ones that Microsoft provides for you. So there's time down here, date and time, speed, states, etc. So it's really building up, giving you the tools that you need without rewriting that logic yourself. And like I say, these are entities, and these entities you can define your own. So if you've got a specific set of products, then you can define that and reuse that entities list across all your topics, so that you don't have to keep redoing that, and it will be available here on this right hand side. But let's keep it simple for now, and let's just do Azure, Power Platform, and Office. And you can see here now that it's basically created those three responses as a split. So depending on which response the user takes, it will go down one of these three paths. So so say we're going to this Power Platform path, we can then respond to them basically saying show message is a great set of resources available on docs.microsoft.com. Oh, anyway, so we're prompting them with the information you require, and this is a very simple situation just to show you it, but the idea is that you could probably be prompting them to your website, you could be prompting them to the FAQs, you could be getting them to maybe a service center, or send them all this information around all the stuff that you want to provide them without taking up an agent's time. So let's just save that and give it a try. So on this left hand side you have this test panel, and this is basically allowing you to test your bot out. So and we saw this earlier. So how do I get a cert? And hopefully, yes, we're in. So it's responded to with me what I wanted to do, and it's giving me those three options. So the user can either type here, or and because I didn't finish it, it's fallen over because I chose the wrong one, or you can select it. Let me just start that again.
Can I just raise a question that Pranav's put in the chat, Carl? Do you have to put everything here so that the bot knows everything? I'm assuming is that the options that you're referring to, Pranav, or?
There are the trigger phrases don't have to be every way that person will say it. They will be augmented with the Microsoft experience and extrapolation, like plurals, etc. So it's using natural language to define that. It doesn't have to be 100%. The options are basically how you're going to define that process and that way through. So yeah, so you do need to tell it all the options, but there is a special one which is other, where you can extrapolate that, but I can show you that in a little bit later. So if I then choose Power Platform, hopefully it will go through this condition and give you that link, and you can see it's been formatted into a proper website for me, so I can go and drive off to this misspelt web address. But maybe more than that, we can be more specific and more customization. So let's add in another node here. So I can add in another question. I want to know their name. So there is a name field, I think. Yeah, person name. And basically is expecting a response from that. And what you should be doing is changing the name of the variable, because at the moment it's called var1. So if I do edit there, I can change that to name. and I can define what the scope of that variable is, whether it's just within this area here, or it can be provided to all of the topics within the bot. So once we transfer between topics, we can keep that name as a variable. We don't have to ask them their name again. Very powerful to allow us to do that. And also we can use that variable in our responses to the customer. So I can insert that here and be more customizable, more friendly with them. They know that they've asked, I've given them this information, so I'm going to use it. So let's just save that and give that another little quick test. And hopefully that will kick in. That wasn't one of the phrases, by the way, but it's managed to think that I do want to talk about this. So let me know my name. And then you can see that now I've got a personalized response. And that's that data entry and using that data, but even more so that let's go to do something about calling an action, and we can create a flow at this point. So we can go over to flow, which Joe's just been through, and it's one of the triggers. So there is a special trigger called Power Virtual Agents, and you can ask for an input, and my first input will be name, and our second input will be the course, so that will be our Power Apps or Azure, etc. And we're just going to respond with, we've got everything under the sun that Joe's already discussed here. We can go and call external systems. We can go and get data. We can go and call the weather API if we wanted to. We've got the world is our oyster at this point. But I'm just going to respond with a cheap and quick response, just to prove that it works and I'm not cheating, etc. Whilst that's saving away, like I was saying, the world is your oyster. We've basically got the ability then to do whatever we want. So when we go back into here now, under Office, call an action, we should see, fingers crossed, yeah, this is our new flow, because I didn't change the name. So another thing, change the names when you're doing it. And as you can see, it's taken those two input variables, and I can link those to the variables that I've already got. I didn't rename my variable here for the course. I can then pass in the course, and then the response, I can then use that as a message, and let's just put that in as the response message. So hopefully once that's saved, we can try again. It will kick in, yeah. Let's do Office, because that's the leg I established it on. It's gone over to Power Automate, and that was the output that I said in that flow. So you can see we're interacting with Power Automate. We've got all that world that opens up to us, and we're then starting to build into all that automation of things. A few other bits here. These connectors, you can move them around, so you can join them up. So depending on which one you're doing, etc., you might have the same choice coming through. If you've only got it, don't really care about the result. You can do lots of other interesting things with it, but it is very much. I'm just going to delete that so it doesn't fall over on me. Very much your canvas to start building this complex logic, and you can ask questions and you can respond, etc., and giving that very natural feel. So I'm done. I've established my bot. I'm ready. What do I need to do next is I need to publish it. This is basically says I'm happy with what I've got. And we have got versionings on here, so you can go and play with the bot in dev before you publish it to allow you to go ahead and create these things. But the other thing that it talks to you about within the PL-900 exam is what do you do with that bot? And we've already established that you can put it on your website, or you can do it on lots of different channels through Microsoft Teams, which is a great one. So you've got this bot on the side that you can be asking questions for, and maybe for HR or some other processes that you could do that sort of interaction with. The demo website is just that. It's just a demo website, and it allows you to show it off to people. Usually it doesn't take that long. Or you can embed it in an iframe effectively with this little code, and you go and give that to your local developer of your website and throw it in so that you've got that frame within your own website. There is some branding that you can do at that point, but there's lots of other options. Facebook's another good one if you want to interact with your customers. Just to show you a few other bits here, there is automating a series of actions within the topics, but that is a bit more than 900 at the moment. We've got the AI capabilities, which is improvements that are coming. But the other one that's really quite interesting is you've got analytics. So you've got this Power BI report showing you how your bot is performing over time, and you can look at the most people that are using certain topics, and maybe you want to start fleshing that out. You can see the ones which topics have dropped through to an agent, which really helps with you sort of understanding where your weaknesses are and your strengths. So it's a great tool to make available. How many have gone through to that agent again, how many are just stop. They tried to get a response and they didn't, that sort of thing. So it's all very good and allows you to do that very quickly and easily. And the final thing here is that we did discuss it, but this is where you'll create your own custom list and be able to have a specific list of things that are specific to your product or your environment, your business process. Okay. That was very quick on Power Virtual Agents. There's not a lot to virtual agents, but it's very powerful when you start getting into, people like the idea of virtual agents that can do things, and it certainly helps with driving business value in these things quite easily and quickly. Is there anything on virtual agents in the chat?
No, I think we've covered up. There was a question just in terms of how you would get the portal. So if you have it on a portal and you want to get the logged in user, how you would sort of feed that through into the virtual agent. I think you would just feed it through as a parameter, wouldn't you, or something? You'd be able to get it from the page and then pass it in.
There is an authentication action. But it needs to be configured, so you can authenticate at that point to go and get an authentication, whether it's an AAD or whatever else it is. That's what, to know who you are.
Cool. But I think that's it in terms of questions, unless anyone else wants to put anything in. But yeah, I think we probably need to start thinking about wrapping up, do we? Looking at the time.
Yeah.
So I'll hand back to me then. The approvals finally come through. You'll be pleased to hear. So I'll show you that very quickly, and then we'll go into the wrap up. So has that come through? Okay.
Yeah, I can see you, Joe.
Good stuff. So the approval will land in here. We can see if we go back onto the flow, it will still be, we've had it open. You would still have the flow in a running state. But at the moment, when I receive it through, it looks something similar to this. I can sort of add on my approve or rejection action based on that. I can also add a comment. I could even reassign the flow as well to somebody else on the tenant. But if I was to just sort of just do rejected as an example, click on confirm, that's then going to go off and sort of complete that flow. We can just confirm that by going back in onto here. And rather nicely, because I'm using Teams as well, I've actually got the notification through in Teams as well just now that it's been rejected. So quite surprised at that nice approval experience that works with the tools that we work with each day. And we can see down here that it's been rejected. I typically have some more actions off the back of this that I'd want to trigger. But yeah, approvals is one of those great things that you can do some quite powerful things with quite quickly, and definitely something that for this exam you need to familiarize yourself with. Okie dokie. So we're going to have to start wrapping up, unfortunately. So I just want to leave you with just some additional things. I think, as you can appreciate, we've covered a lot of content today. Probably could have done justice in across the whole topics really. So just wanted to leave you with some stuff that you can sort of take away, and obviously prepare yourself if you do indeed plan to sit the exam. So for the exam itself, it's useful sometimes just to know what to expect. So when you said it's going to be a 60-minute exam. It's not the same length as the other exams that Microsoft offer out. So as a consequence, there will be less questions that you face as part of that. You'll more than likely take that via Pearson VUE, which you can do via a test center in normal times, but these days it's probably more likely to be at home that you would sort of do that. It's worth just familiarizing yourself with how that check-in process works, because there's nothing worse on, you already, if you're like me, you're already stressing out already on the exam day because you're trying to revise and all that sort of stuff. Last thing you want is to have problems checking in. So make sure that you familiarize yourself how that process works. Do the system test, make sure that it all works. Try and avoid a corporate device if you can, because sometimes you can have issues with firewalls or restrictions and things like that. And just make sure that you're not going to have any last minute problems on the day itself. And in terms of the different types of questions that you've got in there, there's all sorts of different formats and things like that. Again, we can't discuss specific questions, but Microsoft have published a list of the different formats of questions that you can expect on exam. So again, if you're just a little bit unsure, it's your first exam, you don't know what to expect, then definitely would recommend that you read that through just so you can understand that. So we keep mentioning this in terms of general tips, but it really is worth emphasizing. Practice makes perfect. This exam is testing your knowledge on core concepts, and really the best way of getting familiar with that is by just sort of using it. So make sure you've got your trial environment set up, experiment with the functionality we've discussed today. Hopefully we've given you some useful pointers of the things to go to look at sort of immediately, and make sure that you've got a good grasp of the terms and the concepts, because that's what you're going to be assessed on: understanding, knowing the difference between a dashboard and a report, knowing the various different Power Virtual Automate concepts, knowing the best usage case for Power Apps in different scenarios. All of this stuff and more will be tested. Any other tips you'd like to add on to that one, Carl?
No, I think you covered it all there, really. It is just a matter of making sure you go through the exam slowly and methodically. There is a button top left which is usually, I can't remember what it's called, but there's basically to allow you to review later.
Yeah.
So what my approach normally is that I will tick the box for every question and do the questions once and then come back if I've got time, because you learn things along the exam as well. So things that you're not quite so sure on, you'll get clarity on. So use that if you want to, and make sure it's there.
Great, thanks, Carl. So to sort of help you along after today, a couple of things to sort of recommend. Definitely do check out the official learning path. that Microsoft have made available on the website. It's basically just a sort of a self-learning tool that you can use. It's going to go through pretty much most if not all of the stuff that we've gone through today. It also includes regular knowledge checks throughout. There's also a couple of exercises available as well, so you can really test your knowledge. So with your trial environment and with your learning path, you're hopefully going to have everything at your disposal to do well in the exam, all being well. And then finally, something to check out, Microsoft Virtual Training Days. So this will vary based on the geography that you're in, but Microsoft do run these fairly regularly across different technology areas. So it's not just Power Platform, but also Azure as well, Dynamics 365 and things like that. And effectively, they're designed to give you, similar to what we've done today, an overview of the different topics and things like that. It's the best thing with them as well is that you can potentially get a free exam voucher as part of doing it. Microsoft will typically offer this out for free. So don't miss the opportunity. There are upcoming events being run in the UK for this, specifically 27th of May, but do check your local Microsoft. Sound really corporate now. Please check your local Microsoft affiliate for details. Yeah, I imagine there will be ones run in America, in Europe and things like that. So do check that out. So all it leaves us, if you've got any questions, now's really a great time to unmute or put them in the chat. If not, thank you very much. Appreciate your time today, and hope this has been useful.